Chapter 28:37. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched. Even if she was beaten to death, she had to bury this experience. She definitely couldn't let Yi Qianxian, that man, torment her. Especially, she couldn't let him open the door to a new world. Just as Luo Qingtong was thinking about this, Ji Feiyu's cold and gentle voice sounded, if that's the case, then keep it for now. But if there's an owner looking for it, you have to return it at the first moment. Ji Feiyu looked at the little white cat in Sueyu's arms. It was like a snowball, abnormally cute. Its pair of eyes seemed to be able to speak, and at this moment, its eyes were constantly moving. For some reason, Ji Feiyu actually faintly saw a bit of depression and confusion in its eyes, as well as an extremely helpless expression. This should be fake, right? How could a cat be so human-like? Ji Feiyu couldn't help but take another look at this little cat. After confirming that it really didn't have any spiritual aura and wasn't some spiritual beast with spiritual intelligence, he immediately shook his head and secretly laughed. He was really thinking too much. His voice sounded, and immediately, Sueyu and the others cheered and jumped in joy. They really liked this little white cat. If the young master didn't agree to let them keep it, they would definitely be very disappointed. Fortunately, the young master had always been very gentle and considerate, and would never refute their reasonable requests. For such a young master to be able to serve him, it was really their blessing. Everyone was so happy that they kept rubbing Luo Qingtong. The latter already couldn't take it anymore. Seeing that they still wanted to come, she couldn't care about anything else. With a meow, she jumped into Ji Feiyu's carriage and sat on his shoulder. One of her tails circled around his neck, and she wouldn't leave even if she was beaten to death. Damn, Sueyu and the others were too terrifying. Why didn't I see before that these women actually liked small animals so much? What happened to the image of a tomboy? Sueyu, weren't you especially domineering when you were teaching the Commander Qin a lesson? Meow. Stay away from me. Luo Qingtong glared at Sueyu and the others. Who asked her to be unable to scratch them, so she could only stay away from them. Her actions stunned Sueyu and the others, then they laughed. Young master, look, it likes you. They looked at the scene of Luo Qingtong's tail tightly wrapped around Ji Feiyu's neck, and they couldn't help but cover their mouths and laugh. Young master was indeed a very gentle person, even small animals liked to get close to him. Hearing their words, Luo Qingtong's lips suddenly, the corners of her mouth fiercely. These women, who in the end to like your family's young master? If it wasn't to avoid your claws, would be like this? Damn it. But they, Sueyu and the others. Anyway, she was just a cat. What others said had nothing to do with her. I'll just find an opportunity to leave later. As for now, she was determined not to leave Ji Feiyu. To avoid being carried to be carried to avoid being carried to be carried. This group of women was simply too terrifying. She didn't want to be stroked to death. Luo Qingtong thought so, and immediately turned her head away, ignoring Sueyu and the others. She only curled up her limbs and lay on Ji Feiyu's shoulder. Chapter 28:38. No, kitten, young master's body is injured. You should stay by his feet. When they made their move, Luo Qingtong was originally prepared to avoid them. But when she heard their words, Luo Qingtong's body suddenly stopped, allowing Sueyu and the others to carry her down. He was injured. Luo Qingtong looked up at Ji Feiyu, only to discover that the other party's face was faintly pale. But because he had always been weak, there was no color on his face, so it was not very obvious. But now, Luo Qingtong received a hint from Sueyu and the others, so she naturally saw it. It was indeed a sign of insufficient qi in blood. What's going on? In this star city, there was actually someone who could bypass Qin Xiong's protection and injure him. But why didn't she hear any movement? Such a big matter, there was no reason that there was no news in Star City. Could it be that Qin Xiong and the others deliberately let people injure him? But that couldn't be right. Unless Qin Xiong and the others wanted to die, otherwise, they would never let Ji Feiyu suffer the slightest injury. Luo Qingtong could see it from the team before. Although Qin Xiong and the others looked down on Ji Feiyu, they felt that he was a waste as the legitimate son of the family Ji. But they only dared to obey in public but oppose in private. It was absolutely impossible for them to openly rebel against Ji Feiyu, or disobey his orders, causing Ji Feiyu to be injured. Just the family Ji's investigation alone could make them die hundreds of times. Then what was the reason? Luo Qingtong thought so, immediately straightened up and sat at Ji Feiyu's feet, then saw the exposed wound on Ji Feiyu's wrist. It was a very serious wound, so deep that the bone could be seen. Did the family Ji not have medicinal pills? They actually left Ji Feiyu's wound like this. Luo Qingtong looked at the wound on Ji Feiyu's wrist with a surprised expression. The latter, however, raised his hand to cover his wound. Looking at Luo Qingtong's curious gaze, he suddenly smiled and said, "Did I scare you? Don't worry, it's fine now. I've covered it." His voice was very gentle, as if he was talking to a child instead of a small animal. He raised his hand and patted Luo Qingtong's head. She resisted the urge to dodge and went to the other side of Ji Feiyu. She lifted her claws and pressed them on Ji Feiyu's uninjured wrist, carefully checking his pulse. Previously, when she was with the family Ji motorcade, she had wanted to check Ji Feiyu's pulse. The other party's situation was very strange. He clearly had sufficient life force, but his body was weak and his aura was weak. This was obviously not right. However, there were many people in the motorcade, and Ji Feiyu stayed in the carriage every day, so Luo Qingtong couldn't get close to him. Most importantly, he was Mo Zhuling's fiancé, and she was mistakenly thought by Sueyu and the others that she liked him, so she couldn't get close to him. Otherwise, how miserable would it be to be blamed for being a green tea bitch? This was a rare opportunity, so Luo Qingtong took a look for him. She stepped on Ji Feiyu's wrist with her soft little cushion. It felt numb and itchy, but it was very comfortable. In addition, Luo Qingtong's cat claws were naturally not as convenient as a human hand, so she couldn't feel his pulse accurately several times. In order to be able to check carefully, she immediately jumped left and right on Ji Feiyu's left wrist. Chapter 28:39. Ha! This little white cat is so cute. She must be wondering why young master's other hand is different from the previous one. Yes, yes, yes. Ha! Stupid, so cute. Sueyu and the others surrounded Ji Feiyu's carriage and looked at Luo Qingtong's fluttering movements. They immediately convulsed with laughter. Luo Qingtong listened to their words and gritted her teeth. Who were these guys calling stupid? Were they bullying her for not knowing how to speak? She was clearly checking her pulse. She glared at Sueyu and the others. The latter and the others' laughter had almost stopped. Now that they saw her glare, they couldn't help but laugh and say, "Look, she's glaring at us. So cute, she must be shy. Yes, she's angry." Luo Qingtong's heart really hurt when she heard this. She didn't want to pay attention to this group of unreasonable women. Ji Feiyu looked at this scene and couldn't help but laugh for a while. He raised his other hand, clenched his fist, and put it to his lips. He coughed lightly and then laughed softly. Damn, this man is also laughing. Luo Qingtong didn't have time to fly into a rage when she heard Ji Feiyu's cough become hurried. Young master. Sueyu and the others didn't have time to tease the little white cat and hurriedly surrounded Ji Feiyu. A few people patted his back, and another person raised his hand to take off his outer clothes, then revealed the white cloth wrapped inside that was already soaked with blood. You're bleeding again. Young master, did you just pull on your wound? Everyone hurriedly bandaged Ji Feiyu's wound and changed his clothes. Ji Feiyu saw that they were busy and said softly, "It's okay, it will be fine soon." Young master, you're lying. Your injuries have always been self-healing, and any medicinal powder is ineffective. It takes a long time every time, and the pain is increasing day by day. Sui Yu's eyes were red. Young master, why didn't you go easy on him? Anyway, as long as Qin Xiong and the others are scared, they won't dare to chase after little Seven. Hearing her words, Ji Feiyu immediately smiled bitterly and said to her, Qin Xiong was stubborn to the extreme at that time. If I didn't let him know that I was determined, he wouldn't have stopped. What's more, I only poked myself in the chest at that time. It's my body that's disappointing. He sighed softly at this point. His initial slash at the arm was indeed exceptionally resolute and ruthless, but the subsequent slash at the chest, he actually didn't stab in. It was just that, it was just a light prick on the skin, and it became like this. His body was becoming more and more dilapidated. As Ji Feiyu said this, he immediately lowered his eyes to hide the dim light in his eyes. Moreover, I intimidated Qin Xiong for my own reasons. It was not entirely for little Seven. At this point, he suddenly said in a low voice, I want to cancel the engagement. What? Sui Yu and the others were shocked. They looked at Ji Feiyu with indescribable shock on their faces. They never thought that Ji Feiyu would have such a plan in his heart. But, young master, this engagement was personally promised by the old family head to the Star Alliance's leader. Yes, young master. Chapter 2840. The leader of the Star Alliance had saved the old family head's life by chance. The latter had promised to let the third generation of the family Ji's descendants marry Mo Zhuling. Thus, Ji Feiyu had been pushed out. As the son of the family Ji's first wife, he shouldn't have been the one to marry Mo Zhuling. However, because he didn't have any power and couldn't cultivate, he was seen as a disgrace to the family Ji. Once this matter came out, everyone immediately pushed the blame onto Ji Feiyu. The old patriarch also knew that this matter would make things difficult for his family's disciples, so he turned a blind eye to it. Just like that, Ji Feiyu, as the son of a top family in the 8-star region, was forced to marry a girl from a low-level family in the 9-star region. Many people used this matter to mock him. This made his life, which was already mocked because of his lack of power, even worse. Everyone felt sorry for Ji Feiyu, but they also knew that if Ji Feiyu suddenly broke off the engagement, he would be severely punished when he returned. After all, the family Ji's people pushed Ji Feiyu out to marry because they wanted to build a good reputation for being trustworthy. Thus, if Ji Feiyu broke off the engagement, the family would be furious. Everyone looked at Ji Feiyu with red eyes. They didn't know why he had such a plan. Ji Feiyu's life in the family Ji wasn't good to begin with. Now that he wanted to break off the engagement, was he pushing himself to his death? Sir, if you don't like the eldest daughter of the Star Alliance, you can just marry her and not touch her. You can find another girl that you like, okay? Sir, it's not good for you to break off the engagement. The maidservant's eyes all turned red. Ji Feiyu sighed softly. I don't dislike her. He hadn't even met Mo Zhuling, so how could he dislike her? However, you all know that my body is simply too damaged. If it's simply because I lack talent and am unable to cultivate, then so be it. However, I am born with a weak body. I don't even know how long I can live. I'm already feeling more and more powerless. Star Alliance's eldest daughter will feel wronged if she marries me. There are countless good men in this world. She shouldn't hang herself on a rotten tree like me just because of the family Ji's selfishness and face. Ji Feiyu analyzed his thoughts to the maidservants around him. Sueyu and the others were his personal bodyguards and maidservants that his mother had chosen for him since he was young. They were almost like siblings. He had always had the idea of breaking off the engagement, but in order not to alert the enemy, he had never said it out loud. This time, I came to the Star Alliance to break off the engagement. As long as I act a little arrogant and show in front of everyone that I don't like Imo Zhuling, when the engagement is broken off, it will all be my fault. At this point, he suddenly coughed a few times. Then, he suppressed the sweet and fishy taste in his throat. When the time comes, the leader of the Star Alliance will be able to ask the family G for enough compensation based on the kindness of the past. When the time comes, it doesn't matter if the eldest daughter of the Star Alliance marries someone else or chooses another descendant of my family G. At least I won't be holding her back. Don't you all agree? A girl's blooming years shouldn't be wasted on a cripple like me. I've already thought about this matter. You don't need to persuade me anymore. When he said this, Sueyu and the others immediately choked with sobs. Chapter 28:41. No wonder Ji Feiyu didn't express any happiness or opposition when the marriage was mentioned. It turned out that he had been waiting for this day to come. Only when the Star Alliance announced the cancellation of the marriage in front of everyone would the family G, who was far away from the 8-star region, be unable to react in time. Only then could the family G have no choice but to agree to the cancellation of the marriage and give Mo Zhuling a large sum of money as compensation. Alternatively, they could choose another family G's son to marry Mo Zhuling. This way, Mo Zhuling wouldn't be delayed. Why was the young master so stupid? He thought of everyone, but why didn't he think of himself? In this marriage, he was the most innocent and the one who was hurt the most. Because of this marriage with Mo Zhuling, he had been ridiculed and slandered by others. Now that the marriage was cancelled, Mo Zhuling could escape unscathed, but what about him? What would the young master do when he returned to the family G? Not to mention, Mo Zhuling and the Star Alliance might not accept the young master's kindness. The group of servant girls were almost crying. Young master. Their hearts were in pain and they couldn't stop crying. Ji Feiyu gently patted their hands and didn't say anything else. Alright, let's go back. He said softly, I deliberately said that I wanted to go out for a stroll so that I could find an opportunity to talk to you about this. It's good that you know. When that day comes, don't be too nervous and don't try to stop it. As for what happens after we go back, we'll talk about it when we get back. The group of servant girls wiped their tears and then raised their hands to lower the curtains on Ji Feiyu's carriage. The group of people followed the carriage with heavy hearts and left. They didn't care about the Star Alliance's big event happening in front of them. Originally, they had heard that something big had happened here that was related to the Star Alliance and involved Mo Zhuling, so they wanted to come and take a look. But at this moment, everyone was no longer in the mood to do so. She didn't even want to hear anything related to Mo Zhuling's name. She didn't want to feel bad. As a result, he missed the opportunity to find out Mo Zhuling's true colors. Luo Qingtong sat in the carriage and followed Ji Feiyu and the others back to their residence. She looked up at the man in front of her. To be honest, Luo Qingtong was very surprised by Ji Feiyu's words. She had never met a man like Ji Feiyu before. He was clearly in a difficult situation, but he did not develop a sarcastic and cynical temperament. Instead, he was magnanimous, gentle, and radiant. In order not to implicate Mo Zhuling, she was willing to cancel the engagement. He was even afraid that the people of Star Alliance would be blamed by the family G, so he was prepared to take the blame himself. He really had a silly temperament. But this silly temperament touched Luo Qingtong's heart. She thought of the time when she was adopted by the old beggar in her previous life. Everyone advised the old beggar that a person like him couldn't even feed himself, let alone raise a child. It was simply a waste of time. But that person said cheerfully, "It's okay. It doesn't matter if I can't feed myself, as long as I can feed her." Others called her a monster and a red-eyed disease. He told them that it was because he was a beggar and that he was the one who infected her. That person obviously did not have any abilities and was about to starve to death. But he did his best to protect her as she grew up. If it wasn't for him, Luo Qingtong would have died long ago. Without the awakening of supernatural abilities, without the invincible ocular sorcerer, there would be nothing. And now, Ji Feiyu was as silly as the old beggar. Meow. Forget it. Luo Qingtong sighed softly. She was also indebted to Ji Feiyu. This time, she would return the favor and find a way to cure his problem of not being able to cultivate. Chapter 2842. Just as Luo Qingtong was thinking about this, on the other side, in the luxurious mansion of the Star Alliance headquarters, Mo Zhuling opened her eyes. Then, with a puff, she spat out a mouthful of blood. She fell from the bed and her head hit the pear-blossom wooden chair beside her. Her entire body fell to the ground and she was in an extremely sorry state. Black fog. Mo Zhuling's entire body went limp. When black fog self-destructed, she was wrapped in its power and was severely injured. Fortunately, black fog's self-destruction was only a part of its power and Mo Zhuling's was not affected. Otherwise, she wouldn't even be able to come back alive. Thinking about what happened in the virtual mirror array, Mo Zhuling couldn't help but tremble. She lay on the ground and kept calling out Black Fog's name. Her heart was filled with fear. However, Black Fog didn't answer her. She didn't know if it was because it was severely injured or for some other reason. Thinking that Black Fog might disappear from her life because of this, Mo Zhuling's heart trembled. Everything she had now came from the Black Fog. Although she really wanted to get rid of it, now was definitely not the time. Damn it, what was the deal with that little white cat in the mirror array? Since when was there such a powerful restriction in the mirror array? Mo Zhuling's heart was filled with shock and anger. At this moment, Black Fog's weak voice sounded. "I need to rest for a while. Don't call me during this time. I won't answer you even if you call me. Find out what's going on with that mirror formation." Black Fog's voice was filled with the same shock and anger as Mo Zhuling's, as well as shame and anger. It never thought that it would almost die because of a 9-star domain spiritual treasure. What was the deal with that mirror array? How could there be a restriction in it that could hurt it? Even if its power was weakened because of the mirror array, it definitely couldn't be hurt by a 9-star domain spiritual treasure. Black Fog's voice was filled with shame and anger. This time, it had almost failed miserably, causing it to be extremely depressed and angry. It disappeared in front of Mo Zhuling with its anger. Seeing it leave, Mo Zhuling calmed down a little. But soon, she became angry again. Because she suddenly remembered that she couldn't deal with Su Xiaoxiao and the others. The latter would definitely expose her after they left. However, it doesn't matter. She has already injected a trace of power into the bodies of the people from the high-rank continents. As long as she leaves, their bodies will immediately explode. Under such circumstances, even if Su Xiaoxiao and the others confessed, there would be no evidence. At that time, he could say that they were deliberately slandering him. At that time, he might even be able to use this opportunity to beat them up. Although they couldn't do anything to them, they could at least make them suffer a little. Not only that, but it could also ruin the reputation of Su Xiaoxiao and the others. The next time he made a move against them, no one would believe them anymore. As Mo Zhuling thought of this, she suddenly sneered. Her mind was constantly thinking of how to make use of this matter to her advantage. She couldn't wait for Su Xiaoxiao and the others to expose her. Therefore, she wasn't anxious at all. She didn't send anyone to the main square to find out the truth. Chapter 2843. Bang! Just as Mo Zhuling was thinking about how to deal with Su Xiaoxiao and the others, as well as how to turn the tables on them this time, the door to her room was violently kicked open. Because she was too absorbed in her thoughts and her body was too weak to exert any strength, Mo Zhuling was still lying on the ground, looking indescribably battered and exhausted. At this moment, the door to her room was violently kicked open. She was instantly enraged. Bastard! Who allowed you to enter my room without my permission? She thought it was a servant who was concerned about her safety and heard the commotion in her room, so he rushed in from outside to protect her. However, she didn't expect that the person who rushed in angrily from outside was the leader of the Star Alliance, her father. Unfilial daughter. The leader of the Star Alliance was bristling with anger. He had lost all face in the main square, and now he had almost become the laughingstock of the entire Star Alliance. Everyone knew that he had indiscriminately defended Mo Zhuling in public. Not only that, he had also slandered Su Xiaoxiao and the others. He appeared to be tolerant and magnanimous, but in reality, his conscience was completely black. He had deliberately humiliated and slandered Su Xiaoxiao and the others. Now, Elder Fong and the others had seized the opportunity to make things difficult for him. Not only that, he couldn't explain why Mo Zhuling had appeared in the mirror array. This had become a weakness that Elder Fong and the others could use against him. Only the heavens knew that the leader of the Star Alliance really didn't know what was going on. How could Mo Zhuling have entered the mirror array, and no one had reacted to it, so there was no way to know. However, the elders of the Star Alliance didn't listen to his explanation at all. This was especially true for the people on his side. The elders under him were all very disappointed. They felt that he had given this kind of secret to someone like Mo Zhuling instead of his trusted subordinates. It was really disappointing. In an instant, the leader of the Star Alliance was almost completely isolated. He had become the laughingstock of everyone, and now he was being wrongly accused by his own people. His heart was filled with anger. Almost as soon as he left the main square, he appeared in Mo Zhuling's mansion. Bang! After the leader of the Star Alliance kicked open the door to Mo Zhuling's room, he didn't care how pathetic she looked and directly slapped her and sent her flying out. At this moment, he was already fuming with rage. His two eyes were as wide as copper bells, filled with anger and anger. He had almost lost his rationality. He didn't show any mercy in that slap at all. Mo Zhuling was originally half lying on the ground because of his weak body. He had one hand on the chair and couldn't get up at all. Now that he had been slapped by the leader of the Star Alliance, Mo Zhuling was still slapped by the leader of the Star Alliance. Although the leader didn't use his strength, he relied on the strength of his body. He screamed in pain from the force of the leader of the Star Alliance. His entire body flew up in an instant and landed heavily on the bed. Immediately, the entire bed made of heavy red sandalwood disintegrated under the force of Mo Zhuling's blow. Countless red sandalwood shavings mixed with wooden sticks flew toward Mo Zhuling's face. She immediately screamed in pain. After all, she didn't have any defensive strength at all. Father. Chapter 2844. Father, what's wrong with you? Did I do something wrong? Mo Zhuling still didn't know that what he had done had been exposed. He still thought that everything he had done was flawless. The moment she said that, the leader of the Star Alliance's eyes turned even redder. He lifted his leg and kicked Mo Zhuling away. Why are you asking me about what you did? His face was filled with rage. Almost instantly, he kicked Mo Zhuling through the wall of the room. With a loud boom, she crashed into the courtyard outside. Pfft! Mo Zhuling opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. She didn't think that the leader of the Star Alliance would be so ruthless. In fact, even if she did, she wouldn't have been able to avoid it. Because the leader of the Star Alliance wasn't someone she could deal with. If the black fog was here, she might be able to borrow its strength to resist for a while. But now, the black fog's strength was greatly damaged and it had already escaped. It wouldn't come back until its strength recovered. Therefore, Mo Zhuling could only deal with the leader of the Star Alliance alone. How could he be a match for him? Father, even if you want me to die, at least let me know the reason. Mo Zhuling saw that the leader of the Star Alliance was charging towards her again in a rage. She immediately shouted, "What did I do wrong? Or did you just believe whatever I said and want to attack me? I'm your daughter." The moment she said that, the leader of the Star Alliance clenched his fists so tightly that they cracked. He glared at Mo Zhuling and said coldly, "It's because you're my daughter that I haven't killed you yet. Bastard! You're still being dishonest at a time like this." As he spoke, he raised his hand and sent Mo Zhuling flying with another slap. He shouted angrily, "Do you know that I've become a laughingstock because of you?" He raised his hand and pointed at Mo Zhuling. "The reputation and prestige I've built up over half of my life have all been destroyed by your hands. Tell me honestly now. How did you get into the mirror array? What kind of secret does it hold? If you don't tell me these things, I will beat you to death here today. I'll take it as if my marriage to the family G never happened." The leader of the Star Alliance waved his hands as he spoke, his entire body bursting with anger. He was able to suppress his anger and not kill Mo Zhuling because of her engagement with Ji Feiyu. Now, the family G's marriage proposal was in Star City. They had already formally requested to see him and were only waiting for his reply. If not for this, he might have strangled Mo Zhuling to death the moment the matter was exposed. He had always protected this daughter of his like a pearl or a treasure. He loved her dearly and had never treated her unfairly. Whatever she wanted, as long as it was within his means, he would definitely give it to her. But how did she repay him? She had almost destroyed his Star Alliance and his power. He could forget about offending Yi Qianxian. He had forgiven her for not knowing about it. But this time, why did she provoke Su Xiaoxiao and the others? Hadn't she caused enough trouble for him? If it weren't for the fact that Mo Zhuling and Ji Feiyu could benefit him enough to reverse his previous decline, he would have killed Mo Zhuling already. Chapter 28:45. The leader of the Star Alliance was furious. Mo Zhuling, on the other hand, was stunned. "Father, what did you say?" She looked at the leader of the Star Alliance and wanted to continue denying it. "What mirror formation? What do you mean by going in? I don't know what you're talking about." If it was just Su Xiaoxiao's side of the story, she only needed to deny it. However, Mo Zhuling didn't know that it wasn't just Su Xiaoxiao's side of the story. The mirror formation was in front of her, so she couldn't deny it. She didn't go outside to ask for information, so she didn't know that the news had spread all over the Star Alliance. Even if the leader of the Star Alliance tried his best to block it, those who should know already knew. Those who didn't know, unless they deliberately didn't want to hear it, would talk about it in private. What she said was already exposed to the entire Star Alliance. The leader of the Star Alliance took the blame because of her, making people mistakenly think that he helped Mo Zhuling do it. He also got the secret of the mirror formation and secretly gave it to Mo Zhuling to deal with Su Xiaoxiao and the others. He didn't care about the safety of the Star Alliance at all. At this moment, he had no way to defend himself at all. His prestige had plummeted to the extreme. Seeing that Mo Zhuling was still pretending to know nothing, he couldn't hide his anger and murderous intent. With a bang, he directly stomped the bluestone road in front of him into smithereens. A large amount of gravel and dirt flew towards Mo Zhuling like sharp weapons with a violent and terrifying force. "Ah!" Mo Zhuling screamed. He was riddled with holes by the gravel and dirt. His whole body was injured. Blood flowed out of his body. Even the hair on her head was covered in blood. It was disheveled and scattered all over the place. She looked like a madwoman. She was battered and exhausted. "Father!" she screamed. She didn't know why the leader of the Star Alliance would be so cruel to her. Shouldn't he be listening to her sobs? Or was it that he was so afraid of that man that he would kill Su Xiaoxiao and the others just to appease them, regardless of whether it was fabricated or not? Mo Zhuling's heart was filled with hatred. However, at this moment, the Star Alliance's leader's voice sounded. "You still refuse to repent. The Mirror Array has already announced what you have done to the world. Not only that, Zhu Yujia and the others also testified against you. Under such circumstances, you're still saying that you're innocent. So, when you entered the Mirror Matrix, you said you liked that man and wanted to torture Su Xiaoxiao and the others to death. Are you a ghost?" The leader of the Star Alliance was furious. He strode towards Mo Zhuling. The latter was completely immersed in his words. Her heart was filled with disbelief. How was this possible? Under the cover of the black fog, the Mirror Array couldn't possibly detect her existence. How could it record the scene of her dealing with Su Xiaoxiao and the others and show it to everyone? This was impossible. How was this possible? However, just as she was trying to deny it, she suddenly thought of something. The little white cat. It was that little white cat. It must be her. All of his actions had been for naught. Mo Zhuling broke down and wanted to scream. Chapter 2846. Mo Zhuling's heart trembled when she saw his merciless and murderous move. Then, she hurriedly shouted, "Wait, father. I'll speak." As soon as she spoke, the Star Alliance's Alliance Master's hand froze. He coldly looked at her and said, "What is it? What is the secret of the Mirror Array?" He urgently needed this secret to shut the mouths of the elders so that they would not be able to make things difficult for him. At the same time, he also needed to restore his reputation. However, Mo Zhuling's eyes kept changing. She did not dare to speak about the black fog. When the black fog had found her, it had said that if she dared to speak about anything related to it, even if it was only a little, she would suffer an extremely terrible punishment. That punishment would definitely be much worse than when she had been smashed into a pulp by Situme. Mo Zhuling did not dare to disobey the black fog's orders. The black fog had single-handedly saved her from the mud she had been before. She was very clear about the black fog's methods. It could definitely make her suffer a fate worse than death. Therefore, she clenched her teeth and did not dare to reveal anything related to the black fog. But if she did not talk about the black fog, who else could she talk about? Was there any way to get her out of this dangerous situation? Seeing the Star Alliance's Alliance Master's face darken again because of her silence, and his killing intent rose again, she immediately clenched her teeth. Suddenly, a person's name flashed through her mind. Then, as if she had grabbed onto a life-saving straw, she hurriedly shouted, "It's young Master Lu Yu." "Father, it's the young master of the 7-star Fields Jinchang region's Lu family. Father, it was because of his help that I was able to enter the Mirror Array." Mo Zhuling said. She suddenly cried and said, "Father, I didn't mean to hide it from you. It's just that young Master Lu Yu's identity is special. I couldn't tell you, so I kept hiding it from you. Father, I just can't accept it." "Why should you? Those people from the true Spill continent are only people from a low-level continent, but they are almost above you. You should be the ruler of the Star Desolate region. And because of them, I almost became a cripple and could only lie on the bed like mud for the rest of my life. I just can't accept it. That's why I borrowed young Master Lu Yu's hand to teach them a lesson in the Mirror Array. Father, please forgive me. Can you forgive me?" Mo Zhuling knelt at the feet of the leader of the Star Alliance. The latter's expression kept changing. He looked at her and said coldly, "Why would young Master Lu Yu help you?" He already believed half of Mo Zhuling's words. Even if the other party wanted to deceive him, he couldn't have gone into such detail. Furthermore, whether this matter was true or not, he would be able to find out as soon as he investigated. Mo Zhuling's lies were completely useless. Therefore, his voice slowed down a little. If the young master of the Seven-Star Field's aristocratic family was a relatively tyrannical aristocratic family, then he might have some methods to break through their mirror array's defenses and enter without them noticing. This wasn't impossible. Thinking this, he looked at Mo Zhuling, and his complexion changed. His daughter had actually managed to cling on to the young master of the Seven-Star Field's aristocratic family. She wasn't bad. Chapter 2847. Before she finished speaking, the Star Alliance's leader had already understood. Young Master Lu Yu must have taken a fancy to his daughter. That was why he helped her enter the mirror array to deal with Su Xiaoxiao and the others. He just didn't know how much young Master Lu Yu liked Mo Zhuling. If it was deep enough, as the Star Alliance's leader thought of this, his expression completely relaxed. He looked at Mo Zhuling and said, "Why didn't you tell me this earlier?" If he had known that this was done by a young master of an aristocratic family from the Seven-Star Field, then he wouldn't have been so embarrassed when facing the Star Alliance's elders. However, Mo Zhuling didn't dare to tell him that she had originally planned to use young Master Lu Yu's identity as a trump card. When Luo Qingtong appeared in the True Spill continent, then she would use her to deal with her. Now that she had exposed it ahead of time, she didn't know if that would alert the enemy and allow that bitch Luo Qingtong to escape. Mo Zhuling thought of this and suddenly clenched her teeth. The Star Alliance's leader didn't expect her to give him an answer. Because he had already thought of the reason why Mo Zhuling didn't dare to tell him. He looked at Mo Zhuling and asked, "Do you already know? The Ji clan's people have already arrived in Star City. And they have requested to see me. If I'm not mistaken, they should be here to propose marriage." As soon as the Star Alliance's leader said this, Mo Zhuling's expression suddenly changed. "What?" she cried out in alarm. "The family Ji's people have already arrived. How could this be? How could they be so fast?" Mo Zhuling's expression changed. She originally thought that the family Ji's people wouldn't act so quickly. That was because they didn't have much intention of forming a marriage alliance with their side to begin with. Otherwise, he wouldn't have let her get engaged to a trash. At the thought of Ji Feiyu, Mo Zhuling gritted his teeth. He was extremely unwilling to give up. Originally, she was very happy that she could be engaged to the son of the 8-star Dongting family Ji. In the end, by chance, she found out that the legitimate son of the family Ji that she was going to marry in the future was just an abandoned son of a family, a good-for-nothing. Her heart could no longer remain calm. Why should she marry a piece of trash? So what if he was the direct descendant of an 8-star domain's aristocratic family? Without strength, he was no match for any of the scions of the aristocratic families on their side. She was the dignified young mistress of the Star Alliance, yet she had to marry such a person. How could she accept this? Therefore, when he saw Yi Qianxian, Mo Zhuling knew that it was very likely that he was not from their star field, but someone from a high-ranking star field. He immediately prepared to recruit him. But who would have thought that he was someone she couldn't touch? Because of this incident, her life was almost ruined. She had been bedridden for more than half a year, living a life worse than death. As she thought about it, Mo Zhuling developed some hatred for the Dongting family Ji. After all, in her opinion, if the Dongting family Ji hadn't looked down on her and forced her to get engaged to a piece of trash, she might not have ended up like this. Mo Zhuling had never thought of looking for the reason from herself. She just wanted to deal with all the people who had wronged her, and the family Ji was one of them. She had originally planned to deal with the family G after she dealt with Luo Qingtong. She hadn't expected them to come knocking on her door. Chapter 28:48. Thinking of her good-for-nothing fiancé, she said coldly, "Father, I won't marry him. I already know young Master Lu Yu from the 7-star field. Why should I marry someone from the 8-star field? Especially when he's a good-for-nothing." She said this with a cold expression. Then, she said to the Star Alliance's leader, "Father, young Master Lu Yu loves me deeply. He said he wanted to marry me long ago. I just wanted to wait and see. When the time is right, I'll tell you. That way, you can go to the family G and break off the engagement. But now that the family G has come to propose, we can't delay this any longer. I'll ask him to come and propose immediately. Father, just wait for him in the Star Alliance." The moment she said this, the Star Alliance's leader was overjoyed. He had brought up the family G's proposal because he wanted to test Imo Zhuling's attitude. He wanted to see how far her relationship with young Master Lu Yu had progressed and whether she had a firm grasp on the other party. Now, it seemed that Imo Zhuling had a firm grasp on the other party. The young master of the 7-star field's family G was naturally much more powerful than the 8-star field's family G. Unless the Star Alliance's leader was stupid, he wouldn't give up on Lu Yu and continue the engagement with the family G. In fact, he was also very displeased that the family G had sent Ji Feiyu to marry Imo Zhuling. Back then, when he had proposed the marriage to the old head of the family G, he had wanted Imo Zhuling to marry a member of the family G who had a bright future. Then, he would be able to climb up the social ladder of the 8-star field's family. After all, a favor was only temporary. But a marriage alliance would last forever. But who would have thought that the family G would produce a good-for-nothing? Not only that, but she was also the one who married Imo Zhuling. The leader of the Star Alliance had no choice but to accept it. After all, his original intentions were not pure. Since the family G did not reject the engagement, he had no reason to break off the engagement. Otherwise, if the marriage failed and they became enemies instead, he would definitely not be able to bear the consequences. However, now that Imo Zhuling knew a young master from the 7-star field, all the obstacles were gone. Could it be that the family G dared to stop a young master of a 7-star field family from marrying his daughter? So what if she was engaged? Just withdraw. The family G had sent a good-for-nothing to marry his daughter. He had every reason to break off the engagement. As the leader of the Star Alliance thought this, he suddenly felt an indescribable sense of exaltation. As he looked at Imo Zhuling, he felt that he had become cute and adorable. He was no longer as repulsive as he was before. In fact, as long as Imo Zhuling did not threaten his power and foundation, he was very willing to love this daughter of his. But the premise was that she did not cause trouble for him. Especially the kind of trouble that had nearly knocked him into the abyss. As the leader of the Star Alliance thought this, he suddenly looked at Imo Zhuling and said, "Good, I will go and tell the family G that I want to break off the engagement. Also, daughter, are your injuries serious? I really didn't know that there was such a secret behind this matter. But you should also know how serious the consequences of dealing with someone from the true Spill continent are. Don't blame me for being too heavy-handed. If I hadn't been heavy-handed, I wouldn't have been able to explain myself to Fong Cheng and the others." Chapter 28:49. The chief of the Star Alliance pushed the blame of him being too heavy-handed to Elder Fong and the others. In fact, he was angry, so he came to find trouble with Imo Zhuling. But he didn't mention it. He helped Imo Zhuling up from the ground. The latter was lying on the ground. His entire body was covered in blood and mud. It was a tragic sight. But Imo Zhuling didn't dare to be dissatisfied with the Star Alliance's leader because of this. This was because she was relying on the Alliance Master of the Star Alliance. Because she was the leader's daughter, had the identity of the Star Alliance's eldest daughter, and was full of hatred for Luo Qingtong, the Black Fog chose her. Otherwise, who knew if the leader would choose someone else to support her? Because of this, even though Mo Zhuling's heart was filled with hatred, and all the bones in his body felt as if someone had taken them apart and replaced them, and the pain was unbearable, Mo Zhuling didn't dare to be dissatisfied with the Star Alliance's leader. He even smiled and said that he was fine, and thanked his father for his concern. But Mo Zhuling was like this to the Star Alliance's leader, but not to others. Especially to the family Ji's people. At this moment, she transferred all her hatred and pain from being beaten by the Star Alliance's leader to the family Ji's people. Father, you don't have to tell the family Ji's people that we want to break off the engagement, so as to avoid unnecessary trouble. As she spoke, she swallowed an elixir to relieve the external injuries and pain on her body. She then said to the Star Alliance master, previously, we were afraid of the Ji family's strength and identity, so we didn't dare to tell them to break off the engagement. But now, we already have young Master Lu Yu's support. Why should we be afraid of the family Ji's people? They used a piece of trash to propose to us. It's obviously a humiliation to us. Father, don't you want to get back at them? I think we can publicly break off the engagement when the family Ji proposes. This way, we can let the family Ji's people have a taste of how they humiliated us. Let them know that us father and daughter are not to be trifled with. Besides, if young Master Lu Yu comes to propose in person, it will be a great honor for you, father, and you will have more prestige in the Star Alliance. So as to avoid those old dogs in front of Fong Qing from riding on your head by relying on that command plate that's completely useless to them. As Mo Zhuling said this, he laughed coldly. When the leader of the Star Alliance heard her words, his heart skipped a beat. This was indeed an excellent method. Firstly, she could vent her anger at the family Ji's perfunctory attitude. Secondly, it could also increase his prestige. To be honest, ever since Elder Fong and the others had obtained the young emperor command plate, he had always been at a disadvantage because of what Mo Zhuling had done to the true Spill continent. If this continued, he might not be able to keep his position as the leader of the Star Alliance. This was also the reason why the leader of the Star Alliance was so angry that he attacked Mo Zhuling so ruthlessly. This was because he had indeed been forced to retreat step by Elder Fong and the others. And now, Mo Zhuling had come to add to his troubles. The Crown Prince token could not protect Elder Fong and the others, but it could make Elder Fong hesitate to attack. This was because they were the ones who had offended Yi Qianxian in the past. But what if the person who attacked was Lu Yu? Lu Yu did not know about the young emperor command plate. And the command plate did not exist for Elder Fong and the others. If they did not want to be destroyed by Lu Yu, they could only be respectful to him. Chapter 2850. The Star Alliance's leader nodded. Okay, that's fine. But, Ling, are you sure that young Master Lu Yu will come and propose to you at that time? The Star Alliance's leader was a bit worried. Not only would they fail to establish their prestige, but they would also become a laughingstock. Moreover, the family Ji's people were not to be trifled with. Father, don't worry. Mo Zhuling's face was filled with confidence. She wasn't worried at all. She had borrowed the power of the Black Fog to hook up with young Master Lu Yu. She wasn't worried at all that he wouldn't come. Because he wouldn't be willing to give up on her. Otherwise, he wouldn't have proposed to her so many times before. If it weren't for the fact that she wanted to keep him as a trump card, Mo Zhuling would have already agreed. Then, he would have asked the family Ji to cancel the engagement, ruthlessly slapping the family Ji's face. But it wasn't too late. When the family Ji's people came, she would ruthlessly humiliate them. Especially that useless trash who only had the title of family Ji's son. He was the most important. With his body that couldn't cultivate and had a short lifespan, he actually dared to agree to the family G's engagement and propose to her. He was simply a toad lusting after a swan's flesh. Ridiculous. Such a person should be ruthlessly stomped into the mud so that he wouldn't jump out and disgust others. As Mo Zhuling thought this, he suddenly sneered. The Alliance Master of the Star Alliance was satisfied when he heard this and immediately went to make preparations. As for explaining to the Star Alliance's elders, he had already forgotten about it. In any case, when the family G's people were humiliated and the engagement was cancelled, those elders would know what Mo Zhuling was relying on. Would they dare to question young Master Lu Yu as to why he was helping Mo Zhuling deal with the people of True Spill Continent? What a joke. The Star Alliance's leader left with his head held high and his chest puffed out. He was indescribably proud of himself. Mo Zhuling, on the other hand, calmed down and recuperated. At this time, in the room where Ji Feiyu and the others were staying, Luo Qingtong had been jumping around for a long time. It was not easy for her to feel Ji Feiyu's pulse, but she was stunned for a while. Because there was nothing wrong with Ji Feiyu's pulse. He was a completely healthy person, and Luo Qingtong had also used her eye technique to check his meridians, and found that his meridians were also intact. Under such circumstances, how could he be a cripple who couldn't cultivate? Luo Qingtong also wondered if the problem was in Ji Feiyu's dantian. Therefore, she suppressed her impatience and laid in Ji Feiyu's arms for a period of time. She looked at him from head to toe, inside and out. There was nothing wrong. His dantian was perfect to the extreme. It didn't even seem like the dantian of someone who couldn't cultivate. This was because an ordinary person's dantian was completely closed off before they started cultivating. The channels that connected to the meridians were not open. They could only be opened when one's aura revolved and their strength increased. But Ji Feiyu's dantian was naturally open. Every channel that connected to the meridians was incomparably smooth. This physique was almost comparable to Yi Qianqian's heavenly vein body. Although it wasn't as exaggerated as Yi Qianqian's, his strength was increasing almost all the time. Moreover, he was able to naturally connect with the meridians, as if he were a true child of the heavenly Tao, born with a grasp of the world's great Tao. Chapter 28:51. What did it mean to not encounter a bottleneck? Luo Qingtong could be considered a lucky example. From the beginning of her cultivation until now, she had relied on her blood pupil to obtain a lot of opportunities. However, when she was promoted to the Venerable Realm, she was still stuck for a period of time. If she hadn't met Yi Qianxian in the abandoned continent and experienced several battles with the weak against the strong, she might not have been able to smoothly break through the bottleneck and promote to the Venerable Realm. However, Ji Feiyu's innate dantian was perfect, so he would almost never encounter a problem like Luo Qingtong's. More importantly, this bastard was a monstrous genius who was knowledgeable and multi-talented. What was an erudite and multi-talented genius? Luo Qingtong saw with her own eyes that Sueyu and the others came to consult Ji Feiyu with questions about cultivation that they didn't understand. As a result, this fellow, damn it. He clearly couldn't cultivate, but he was able to completely understand the cultivation problems that Sueyu and the others had raised. He could easily solve the cultivation problems that troubled Sueyu and the others, so that their strength could be further improved. Luo Qingtong only knew now that Sueyu and the others, as Ji Feiyu's personal maidservants, were stronger than most of the experts around him. They even dared to go against Qin Xiong and take him down a notch. It turned out that it was because they had Ji Feiyu, such a super genius, as their backing. No wonder their strength was so equal, and almost the same. When Luo Qingtong saw it before, she was a little surprised. She felt that with such a lineup around Ji Feiyu, his life in the family should be very good. Otherwise, how could there be so many maidservants with good aptitude by his side? It turned out that this was not because Sueyu and the others' aptitude was too good, but because Ji Feiyu's ability as their master was too strong. Luo Qingtong noticed that Ji Feiyu's answers to Sueyu and the others' questions were entirely based on his experiences and insights from the ancient books. That was to say, although this guy couldn't cultivate, he could understand all the cultivation problems and key points only by reading some cultivation classics. He could even give Sueyu and the others some guidance. If this wasn't a ghost, then what was? If he was allowed to cultivate, who knew how much his strength would increase? After all, the strengths of Sueyu and the others were around the Violet Exalt realm. In other words, Ji Feiyu couldn't even draw energy into his body, but he was able to guide Purple Venerable Realm experts in their cultivation. Luo Qingtong had been lying by his side for the past few days. She had also been able to hear a lot of his experiences. She had really benefited a lot. Many parts of his body felt enlightened. His comprehension and application of strength and power had been greatly improved. One had to know that the reason why she suppressed her strength and didn't slowly recover was entirely because her strength had increased too quickly on the abandoned continent. Her understanding of the strength of the Violet Exalt realm wasn't stable enough. She was afraid that it would affect her future advancement. But now that she heard Ji Feiyu's explanation, she understood a lot. It wouldn't be long before she didn't need to suppress her strength and slowly recovered it. Damn, I really owe him a big favor. However, she still had no clue about Ji Feiyu's problem of not being able to cultivate. Luo Qingtong thought so and immediately scratched the ground with her claws in annoyance. One had to know that she came to help others, but in the end, she was the one being helped. Chapter 2852. Luo Qingtong was thinking about this when Ji Feiyu, who was beside her, saw her actions and immediately laughed. What's wrong? Are you unhappy? He looked at the little white cat in front of him and was in a very good mood. He didn't know why, but he was very happy when he saw this little white cat. The other party's eyes seemed to be able to speak. Sometimes, Ji Feiyu even felt like he wasn't talking to a cat, but to a person. Most importantly, the little fellow looked very obedient. When she was by his side, she never made a fuss or jumped around. Every time she did something unexpected, it was also very cute. For example, she liked to play with her hand. Ji Feiyu always indulged her in playing around. Anyway, she wouldn't reach out her claws to hurt him. She would just step on his hand and play with it seriously. That look was very funny. Speaking of which, if it weren't for her appearance being too funny, Ji Feiyu would have thought that she was checking his pulse. Thinking of how she tried to spread her 2 toes and put them on his wrist, Ji Feiyu wanted to laugh. Now that he saw her lying on the ground and scratching her claws unhappily, he thought for a moment and immediately put his other hand in front of her. Shoo! Looking at the little white cat looking up at him in surprise, Ji Feiyu smiled. As if he was talking to someone, he directly raised a finger and placed it on his lips. He shushed her softly, indicating for her not to scream. Come, play with me. But you can't scratch with your claws. You have to be gentle. Otherwise, you'll be discovered by Sueyu and the others. At that time, they'll definitely nag me. Also, you won't be able to play next time. As he spoke, he lovingly moved his other injured hand in front of Luo Qingtong and pulled open the sleeve on his wrist. He exposed his wound in front of the little white cat. Ji Feiyu wondered if this little white cat had gotten tired of playing with his other hand, so she was unhappy. Since that was the case, he would let her play with his hand as well. Anyway, although the wound on his hand had not completely healed, it was no longer bleeding. As long as the little guy paid attention and didn't step on it too hard, it shouldn't be a problem. As he thought of this, he dotingly patted Luo Qingtong's head, saying, Come, let's play. When he said that, Luo Qingtong was speechless. What was this guy doing? Did he think that she took his pulse every day because she was playing with him? Furthermore, she wanted to play with his wound just because she was unhappy and didn't have anything to play with. Was she too careless or too stupid? I'm a cat now. I'll give your wound a scratch and a bite, and you'll know how to cry. Luo Qingtong was speechless for a while. She raised her claws to push his hand away. However, just as her claws touched Ji Feiyu's hand, because the latter moved forward, Luo Qingtong's claws touched Ji Feiyu's wound in an instant. The latter groaned in pain, but Luo Qingtong suddenly straightened her body. Meow! Luo Qingtong's eyes were filled with surprise. She stared at the wound on Ji Feiyu's hand with her round eyes. The flesh on the latter's wound was rolling, and the scene on it was very bloody. Chapter 28:53. Wang. In Luo Qingtong's mind, the consciousness of the heavenly spirit would begin to beat. Just as Luo Qingtong's claws touched Ji Feiyu's wound, the consciousness of the heavenly spirit would in her mind began to beat. It had to be known that ever since the heavenly spirit would blocked the black fog formed by the resentment of the powerhouses in the fallen immortal land, it had been silent without any movement. Luo Qingtong originally wanted to wait until she returned to the true Spill continent before leaving. At that time, she would go to the other star domains and see if she could restore the heavenly spirit wood. She didn't expect that the seed of the heavenly spirit would suddenly tremble because she touched Ji Feiyu's wound. It had to be known that the heavenly spirit would fed on souls, especially the power of resentment between heaven and earth, the power of Yin souls, and the source of its power. Could it be that Ji Feiyu's problem of not being able to cultivate had something to do with his soul? As Luo Qingtong thought this, she suddenly opened her blood-red eyes and looked at Ji Feiyu's wound. When she had probed Ji Feiyu's body before, she had intentionally or unintentionally avoided his wound. The main reason was that when she was squatting on Ji Feiyu's shoulder, Sui Yu and the others had told her not to touch Ji Feiyu's wound. Luo Qingtong had unconsciously ignored Ji Feiyu's wound. When she had probed Ji Feiyu's body, she hadn't found anything wrong with his body. It was reasonable to say that there shouldn't be any problems with his wound, so Luo Qingtong had ignored it. Now that the heavenly spirit wood's consciousness had trembled, Luo Qingtong had reacted. She was afraid that she had overlooked something. Ji Feiyu's body didn't have any problems, but that didn't mean that he really didn't have any problems. This matter was most likely related to his soul. And the only way for her to probe his soul would be through this wound of his. With that thought in mind, Luo Qingtong immediately pounced on Ji Feiyu's wound. She carefully examined the wound on Ji Feiyu's hand. Then, she thought for a moment and jumped out of the room. After a while, she jumped back in with a bottle of medicine in her mouth. Behind her was a group of maidservants who were chasing after her. "Hey, kitten, give me back my medicine. You can't play with that." Suiyu and the others chased after Luo Qingtong's figure and rushed to Ji Feiyu's room. However, they saw Luo Qingtong pouring the medicinal liquid in her mouth onto Ji Feiyu's wound. They were immediately surprised. "So you brought the medicine here to treat young master's injuries? She's really obedient." Ji Feiyu was originally groaning in pain because Luo Qingtong's claws poked at his wound. His forehead was full of sweat. His body was very strange. He couldn't be injured at all. If he was injured, he would be in great pain. Not only that, his wound couldn't be healed by medicine. It could only be healed slowly by itself. Therefore, at this moment, when he saw Luo Qingtong holding the medicinal liquid in her mouth to treat his wound, he immediately smiled. "Thank you, but this medicinal liquid is useless to me. Thank you for your concern." Ji Feiyu's smile was weak, but he still managed to support his body and stroked Luo Qingtong. However, Luo Qingtong ignored him. Her eyes were fixed on Ji Feiyu's wound. Chapter 2854. The moment the medicinal power was attached to Ji Feiyu's wound, Luo Qingtong's blood-red eyes clearly revealed the unknown scene. Wisps of grayish-black aura rose from Ji Feiyu's flesh and blood, entangling and corroding the medicinal power. The wisps of medicinal power were devoured by the grayish-black marks. Slowly, the medicinal power was exhausted. When the grayish-black marks rose, Luo Qingtong also saw them clearly. The grayish-black aura completely intertwined into a net, wrapping Ji Feiyu's entire body in it. The aura permeated his limbs, bones, and flesh, and couldn't be separated at all. It was as if his entire body had become one. The grayish-black marks finally intertwined and sank into the top of Ji Feiyu's head. As expected, his illness came from his soul. When the grayish-black aura appeared, Luo Qingtong's consciousness of the heavenly spiritual tree in her mind trembled even more violently. It released a strong message to Luo Qingtong. If not for the fact that Luo Qingtong's soul was attached to Xiao Tuanzi's body and the heavenly spiritual tree's physical body wasn't by her side, the heavenly spiritual tree's seed would have already pounced on Ji Feiyu. It coveted the grayish-black aura very much. If it could absorb the grayish-black aura, it would be able to germinate from its seed state and obtain a new life. When the heavenly spiritual tree's consciousness trembled, Luo Qingtong also clearly saw that the grayish-black mark sank into Ji Feiyu's head, and an extremely thick blood-red line connected to the void behind him. Obviously, the grayish-black marks weren't the only problem on Ji Feiyu's body. There was something behind them that was controlling and connecting them. Simply removing the grayish-black marks wouldn't be of any use. Just as she was thinking about this, Little Pig's voice rang out in her mind. Ha! Blood curse. Damn, there are still people who use such a sinister method to harm their own descendants. Little Pig was guarding Luo Qingtong's body in the tavern. When he felt the heavenly spiritual tree's consciousness tremble, he separated a part of his consciousness to take a look. He didn't expect to discover such a shocking matter. Blood curse. It was a method of using the bloodline connection to steal the lifespan and soul power of one's bloodline to provide for oneself. This was a type of evil magic. Who in the family Ji was so vicious that they actually planted this blood curse on Ji Feiyu's body? Moreover, it was the most vicious soul blood curse. The victim's soul would weaken, and in the end, they would completely dissipate and die. His soul power and lifespan would be completely absorbed by the person who had planted the blood curse on him. That person would possess all his talents and abilities. This kind of blood curse was extremely insidious. At the same time, because the conditions for casting the curse were extremely harsh, it was not easy to succeed. Once it was successful, it succeeded. The curse was found. The curses was killed. She didn't expect Ji Feiyu to be afflicted with such a blood curse. No wonder his body was healthy, but his Xiantian Dantian was perfect, yet he was trash. His soul power was constantly being absorbed, and he couldn't withstand the pressure of cultivation. Chapter 2855. After listening to Little Pig's explanation, Luo Qingtong immediately understood what was going on. So that's how it is. She finally understood what was going on. No wonder Ji Feiyu's body was weak and full of vitality, even though she felt that his body was very healthy and full of vitality. It turned out that the soul power in his body was constantly being robbed by someone through the aura of the blood curse. Due to the slow process and the concealment of the bloodline's aura, the blood curse had completely merged with Ji Feiyu's body. Therefore, Luo Qingtong's blood-red eyes couldn't see the blood curse before it was fully revealed. This was because the blood curse was a part of Ji Feiyu's body and was only being controlled by someone through the bloodline connection. However, once Luo Qingtong discovered the existence of the blood curse, it would be troublesome for her to remove it. This was because even if she could remove the power of the blood curse from Ji Feiyu's body, as long as the person who cast the curse wanted to, it could still continue to curse Ji Feiyu. Therefore, the solution to the blood curse would ultimately depend on the person who cast the curse. Otherwise, Luo Qingtong wouldn't be able to do anything even if she removed the blood curse. On the contrary, it would only alert the other party and alert them. When Ji Feiyu returned to the Ji family, he was afraid that what awaited him would be the fate of death. This was because the person who cast the blood curse definitely wouldn't leave any variables behind. With this thought in mind, Luo Qingtong immediately knelt on the ground with a frown. It seemed that if she wanted to completely free Ji Feiyu from the blood curse, she would have to return to the family Ji with him. Fortunately, the power of the blood curse in his body seemed to be a rare tonic for the heavenly spiritual wood. This way, returning to the family Ji with him wasn't a loss. She could even return the favor while she was at it. With this thought in mind, Luo Qingtong no longer felt conflicted. However, even if she couldn't remove the power of the blood curse for the time being, Luo Qingtong couldn't let it continue to absorb Ji Feiyu's soul power. Otherwise, Luo Qingtong didn't know how long Ji Feiyu could last. If he was killed by the person who cast the blood curse, then it would be troublesome. With this thought in mind, Luo Qingtong immediately straightened her body with a meow. At this time, Sui Yu and the others had already left. Previously, they were afraid that Luo Qingtong had picked up the medicine bottle and drank it by mistake. Now that they saw that she had picked it up for their young master, they did not pursue the matter. They only greeted Ji Feiyu and left directly. After they left, Luo Qingtong jumped onto Ji Feiyu's body, meow. The latter was looking at her with a smile. He wasn't annoyed when she ran onto his back. But when he saw her constantly scratching his clothes, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Hey, little guy, what are you doing? Be careful not to fall." As he spoke, he raised his hand to take Luo Qingtong off his back. However, the latter glared at him and used her claws to scratch his hand away. Seeing Luo Qingtong persevering in using her claws to scratch his clothes, Ji Feiyu finally compromised. Okay. I'll let you play, okay?" Ji Feiyu looked helpless and took off his clothes. Otherwise, Luo Qingtong would have dug a big hole in his clothes. Chapter 2856. Ji Feiyu really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If it was someone else, they would definitely drive the little white cat away. But Ji Feiyu's temperament was generous and gentle, and he liked this little white cat very much. He felt that his mood was much better with it accompanying him. Therefore, he didn't get angry at her, but he had no choice but to take off his inner clothes. Of course, this was also because the person in front of him was a cat. Otherwise, he would never do such a thing. Even his personal maidservants, other than bandaging him when he was injured, Ji Feiyu usually wouldn't let them serve him close to help him change clothes or bathe. His personality was shy and simple, and at the same time, he regarded Sui Yu and the others as his younger sisters. He definitely wouldn't instruct them to do such a thing. What's more, he didn't want to be a cripple in terms of cultivation, and also a cripple in terms of life. Therefore, he had always taken care of the matters in his life by himself. And when Ji Feiyu took off his inner clothes, Luo Qingtong also raised her claws and gathered a force. With her soul power as the foundation, she drew a dragon snake inscription on his back. This was naturally a life-saving inscription pattern drawn on his body that could resist the suction force of the blood curse. This inscription pattern was drawn by Luo Qingtong's soul power. Almost as soon as it immersed into Ji Feiyu's body, it walked through his limbs and bones, isolating the blood curse power that had fused and wrapped Ji Feiyu's body. Ji Feiyu felt that the intense pain from his wounds had lessened by a lot. This was completely because when he was injured, it was equivalent to drawing a knife on the blood curse power in his body, destroying the blood curse power's absorption and traces of the blood curse power. Under such circumstances, the blood curse power's backlash naturally doubled the absorption of the soul power in his body, causing his body to become even weaker, and the pain from his wounds became even more unbearable. Therefore, it was abnormally painful and torturous. At this time, Luo Qingtong isolated the absorption of the blood curse power in his body. The pain tolerance of his wounds returned to normal, and naturally it wasn't so painful. At the same time, his soul power no longer disappeared, and his body was not so weak. Naturally, the feeling of pain was not so obvious. And when Ji Feiyu was surprised by the changes in his wounds, Luo Qingtong jumped down from his body again, and then her figure disappeared in front of him. After a while, she appeared in front of him with a bottle of pills in her mouth. Meow. Luo Qingtong put the pill bottle in her mouth on the ground and pushed it towards Ji Feiyu. This medicinal pill was naturally obtained from Suiyu and the others. And Luo Qingtong, and Qingtong to Qingtong to Qingtong. To Qingtong, Qingtong. To Qingtong. To Qingtong. To Qingtong to Qingtong to Qingtong, T. Kinkingtong to Qingtong. Her to Qingtong these guys, I'm trying to save your young master. You're making it seem like I'm playing around. In fact, in the eyes of Suiyu and the others, Luo Qingtong was playing around. But they were also willing to indulge Luo Qingtong. Anyway, she was using their pills, and she was using them on their young master. What was wrong with that? Even if they knew that these pills were useless for their young master's injuries, there was no harm in it, right? It was enough to make their young master happy for a while. Since this little white cat came to their side, their young master's face was smiling more than before. Chapter 28:57. After getting the bottle of elixir, Luo Qingtong immediately ran to a remote corner with the bottle of elixir in her mouth. She carefully poured out the elixir in the bottle with her cat claws. Then she engraved a medicinal inscription on it. She needed some of the efficacy of this elixir, but she couldn't use Tuanzi's body to extract the efficacy of this elixir. Fortunately, there were medicinal inscriptions in the inscription technique, which could strengthen and purify the efficacy of the elixir. Luo Qingtong opened her bloody eyes, removed the efficacy that she didn't want, and purified it. Very soon, it finished needing a new pill and was successful. With this bottle of elixir, she quickly returned to Ji Feiyu. The latter didn't know about this at all. At this moment, he looked at the elixir that the little fellow had poured out of the bottle. It was so badly needed that it didn't look like an elixir, but a lump of mud. His face was full of helplessness and indulgence. This elixir had been played with by this little fellow and looked very bad, but Ji Feiyu didn't show any disdain on his face. Is this for me? For me to eat? He pinched the elixir that looked like a mud ball and looked at Luo Qingtong. Meow. Luo Qingtong nodded and pushed the empty bottle in front of her forward. Then she raised her claws and scratched his hand that was holding the pill, urging him to eat it quickly. Otherwise, the efficacy that was specially gathered and purified by the medicinal inscription technique would dissipate into the elixir again. At that time, she would lose the efficacy of the elixir that she wanted to make for Ji Feiyu. She also knew that the elixir she made now didn't look very good. But she didn't have hands and feet, and it wasn't her original body, so she couldn't refine the elixir at all. She could only let Ji Feiyu eat this elixir. If he didn't want to eat it, then he didn't have this blessing. Anyway, the power of the blood curse that she wanted to make for him had been isolated. The power of this elixir was only to provide him with the soul power to recover. At the same time, it was also to let the power of the blood curse have something to absorb, so that the person who put the curse on the family Ji wouldn't find anything wrong and forcibly strengthen the power of the blood curse. At that time, the unlucky one would still be Ji Feiyu. For her, there was no loss. Looking at the little white cat's actions, Ji Feiyu's heart felt warm. This elixir looked so bad. If it was someone else, they would definitely not eat it. However, Ji Feiyu didn't mind it at all and directly swallowed the pill. This was the first time he received concern from a cat. The little fellow's protection of him. Wasn't it just a dirty elixir? What was it? In fact, when Ji Feiyu saw the pill bottle, he knew that Luo Qingtong must have gotten this pill from Sueyu and the others. Thinking of the scene where it picked up the medicinal liquid for him and poured it on his wound, Ji Feiyu smiled. Seeing him eat the elixir, Luo Qingtong was very satisfied. Fortunately, the other party didn't waste her painstaking efforts. Otherwise, she wouldn't have bothered with him. With her cat-like body, it would be very difficult for her to make such an elixir for him. If he didn't eat it, it would save her a lot of trouble. After Ji Feiyu ate this elixir, he immediately noticed an obvious change. He felt that the weakness in his body seemed to have lessened. The feeling of being very weak all the time in the past, as if he could faint at any time after taking 2 steps, seemed to be gone. He felt indescribably relaxed and clear-minded, as if he had lived a new life. Chapter 28:58. Ji Feiyu looked at Luo Qingtong in surprise. If it was a coincidence that Luo Qingtong patted his back for a while, causing the pain of his wound to lessen, then what was going on with this medicinal pill now? Could it be that this medicinal pill wasn't taken from Sueyu and the others? Thinking of this, he suddenly said to Luo Qingtong, "Little guy, this was made by you. What did you give me to eat?" Knowing that Luo Qingtong wouldn't answer him, Ji Feiyu couldn't help but ask. All of this was really too strange. Could it be that this little white cat had cured his innate weakness? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but do what he did every time in the past. He directly closed his eyes and began to circulate the mental cultivation method and began to draw qi into his body. Ji Feiyu used to do this every time, but every time he did it, he would only be disappointed. Therefore, slowly, he stopped doing it. Only occasionally, in the dead of night, he still couldn't help but draw qi into his body. Because every time he drew qi into his body, he felt it. However, after the spiritual energy entered his body, it disappeared without a trace. Ji Feiyu never wanted to believe that he was a cripple. But he really couldn't leave behind the spiritual energy that he drew qi into his body. For this reason, he didn't know how many alchemists he had seen, but all of them said that there was no problem with his body. Slowly, Ji Feiyu gave up and believed that he was a cripple. But in his heart, he couldn't completely accept it. But now, under his drawing qi into his body, all the power was left behind. It was really left behind. He could cultivate. Ji Feiyu looked at the power flowing in his body with surprise and shock. In a short moment, he rose to the level of martial master, and his strength directly crossed the martial disciple and martial warrior realm. This was only the first time he drew qi into his body. At this time, others could barely comprehend the existence of spiritual energy. However, Ji Feiyu's strength had increased by leaps and bounds. The speed of his advancement was comparable to when Luo Qingtong had suppressed her strength to recover. However, Luo Qingtong had already reached this level of strength and had regained her strength. This was Ji Feiyu's first time cultivating. He had never come into contact with power or cultivated before, yet he had broken through to the martial master realm so quickly. If others didn't know, they would probably think that he was the one who had regained his strength after losing it. Luo Qingtong was speechless. Could it be said that he was indeed a genius? This cultivation breakthrough speed was simply too fast. While Luo Qingtong was speechless, Ji Feiyu laughed. He picked up Luo Qingtong and spun her around. "Thank you. Thank you, little guy. Thank you for helping me, for curing my illness." Ji Feiyu's laughter attracted all of Sueyu and the others to rush over. Originally, when they saw him spinning around with the little white cat in his arms, they quickly rushed over and exclaimed, "Young master, be careful." However, when they discovered the aura of power emitted from Ji Feiyu's body, their faces instantly froze. Then, they stopped in their tracks. Young master. Everyone's faces were filled with tears and laughter. They looked at Ji Feiyu, who looked incomparably healthy, and couldn't believe their eyes. Ha! Sueyu, look, I'm fine. From now on, I'm no longer a trash. Ji Feiyu looked at Sueyu and the others with bright eyes. The latter and the others also cried tears of joy. At this moment, a voice suddenly came from outside. Chapter 28:59. Qin Xiong stood outside the courtyard with a cold expression. He could vaguely hear the sounds of crying and laughing coming from Ji Feiyu's room, but he didn't care at all. He didn't know what was going on in Ji Feiyu's room, but ever since Ji Feiyu injured himself last time, the sound of Sueyu and the others crying could be heard from time to time. It was probably the same this time. Thus, Qin Xiong couldn't be bothered to investigate. As long as he safely protected Ji Feiyu until the marriage proposal was successful and sent him back to the family Ji, everything would be fine. Otherwise, this trash would use his safety to threaten him again and suffer an unexpected calamity. Thinking of how Ji Feiyu had used self-harm to threaten him in order to protect that strange girl called Luo Xiaoqi, Qin Xiong felt depressed and disdainful. This was probably the only way this piece of trash could threaten him. Humph. Thinking of this, Qin Xiong unwillingly lowered his head and reported. When Ji Feiyu and the others heard his voice, the room suddenly fell silent. Not for anything else, but the fact that Ji Feiyu could cultivate couldn't be known to others. Especially if Qin Xiong and the others knew. Otherwise, who knew what they would do? Ji Feiyu was originally the son of the first wife of the family Ji Feiyu. He was naturally a candidate for the position of young master. It was only because he was born with a weak body that he couldn't cultivate that he couldn't become the young master. Now that his illness was cured, who knew how many people in the family Ji would be shocked and depressed? This was definitely something that would turn the family Ji upside down. Before returning to a safe place, this matter couldn't be known to others. Everyone looked at each other and immediately reached a consensus. Young master understands. Commander Qin, you can leave. Sueyu and the others raised their voices. Then, they looked at Ji Feiyu. Young master, we will be very happy to know that you can cultivate. But we can't reveal this matter yet. Qin Xiong and the others have been neglectful and disdainful of you. If he knew that young master could cultivate, he would definitely be terrified. He might even kill young master at all costs. So, young master, you can't let them know that you can cultivate. Everything can wait until we return to the family Ji, okay? Yes. Ji Feiyu listened to Sueyu and the others and nodded. His mind was exquisite. Just by relying on some of the explanations and experiences in the ancient books, he could solve the cultivation problems of Sueyu and the others. His mind was sharp and agile, so he naturally knew what was best for him. I know. Everything still depends on Kitten. Little guy, thank you so much. He looked at Luo Qintong, who had struggled out of his arms and was squatting on his shoulder. The latter's expression was indifferent, and he did not say anything as he listened to his words. Speaking of this matter, it was all thanks to Ji Feiyu's good character. Otherwise, Luo Qingtong might not have helped him. As the saying goes, there must be an effect for every cause. If Ji Feiyu hadn't helped Luo Qingtong time and time again, she wouldn't have helped him. Ji Feiyu wasn't angry that the little white cat didn't respond to him. He looked at Luo Qingtong and was already sure that it was definitely not an ordinary little white cat. He didn't know what kind of demonic beast it was. It was actually so understanding and could even help him solve his weak body. Could it be some kind of spirit beast? Chapter 2860. There were many types of beasts in this world, but spirit beasts were extremely hard to find. Their species and grades weren't necessarily rare, but because they were infused with the laws of heaven and earth, they could cultivate independently like humans and constantly transform. To be honest, a powerful spirit beast might not be inferior to a divine beast. Could this little white cat be a spirit beast? However, although Ji Feiyu thought so, his attitude towards Luo Qingtong didn't change much. Because in his opinion, regardless of whether Luo Qingtong was a spirit beast or not, she was still that cute little white cat. His original intention of bringing her back wasn't because she could help him. Changing his attitude towards her purely because she might be a spirit beast was an insult to this little white cat. At the same time, it was also a kind of disrespect to her. Therefore, Ji Feiyu didn't change his attitude towards her and still treated her the same as before. He gently patted Luo Qingtong's head, then changed his clothes and took her, Suiyu, and the others to meet the people from the Star Alliance. Before they left, Suiyu and the others had already brought over some medicine to cover their breath and had Ji Feiyu take it. When the group arrived at the main hall, the people from the Star Alliance were already waiting there. These people were all sent by the leader of the Star Alliance. The leader had received Mo Zhuling's words and sent people here to tell Ji Feiyu and the others that he attached great importance to this marriage proposal. Therefore, he was going to hold a banquet in the main square to announce this matter to the world. He wanted everyone to know that the Star Alliance and the family Ji had become in-laws and that Ji Feiyu wanted to marry Mo Zhuling. He asked Ji Feiyu to propose to Mo Zhuling in public on that day to show how much he valued Mo Zhuling and the Star Alliance. Ji Feiyu couldn't refuse the leader of the Star Alliance's request. Now that he was able to cultivate, he naturally did not intend to break off the engagement. Thinking about how Mo Zhuling was going to marry a trash like him, even though his problem of not being able to cultivate had been cured, he still needed more time to observe. Not only that, but because of some matters with the Ji family, he couldn't announce this to the public. This really made Mo Zhuling feel wronged. Therefore, Ji Feiyu, who felt guilty, nodded and agreed even though he didn't like this kind of high-profile and ostentatious occasion. On the other hand, Qin Xiong and the others were extremely proud and complacent. In their eyes, this was the time for them to shine. The Alliance Master of the Star Alliance knew how to conduct himself very well. He had actually made such a big deal out of their marriage proposal. He was really very smart. Everyone was very satisfied. Only Luo Qingtong squatted on Ji Feiyu's shoulder, meowed softly and waved her tail. If she hadn't guessed wrong, there was something fishy about this banquet. She had originally thought that these people who came with Ji Feiyu to meet the Star Alliance would find out about Mo Zhuling's tragic situation. These people were most likely here to break off the engagement. After all, what Mo Zhuling had done to Su Xiaoxiao and the others in the mirror array had already been exposed. How could the Star Alliance not deal with her and allow her to arrogantly hold a marriage proposal banquet and marry Ji Feiyu? Just thinking about it made it seem impossible. However, this had happened. How could Luo Qingtong not think too much about it? Other than the black fog, Mo Zhuling might have some other trump card that forced the people of the Star Alliance to compromise in fear. This banquet was held for Ji Feiyu and the others. This was also good. She didn't want to disgust herself by putting Ji Feiyu, a beautiful flower, on top of Mo Zhuling's pile of cow dung. As Luo Qingtong thought about this, she suddenly smiled with great interest. Chapter 2861. While Ji Feiyu and the others were sending off the members of the Star Alliance, somewhere else in Star City. In a luxurious courtyard. A very handsome man picked up a white letter and looked at the contents. He suddenly smiled. Mo Zhuling sent me a letter. She wants me to propose marriage to her at the marriage proposal banquet in 2 days. As he spoke, he casually tore up the letter in his hand. A middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s or 50s said in a low voice, Mo Zhuling probably thinks that young master is deeply in love with her and that you only want her." His expression was one of disdain. A woman like Mo Zhuling, if not for the fact that she had shown her abilities and the quality of the pills she had taken out were extremely high, she would have been a member of the Star Alliance. Furthermore, her identity as the eldest daughter of the Star Alliance would be of great help to them in their investigation. They might not have bothered with her for so long. Now, she actually wanted young master to propose marriage to her in front of everyone. Did she really think that she was a heavenly daughter who was insufferably arrogant? When he said that, the handsome but slightly cold man snorted and sneered. "If she wants me to propose marriage to her, then I'll do it. In any case, whether I marry her or not is up to me." Lu Yu didn't take this matter to heart at all. In his opinion, if he could propose marriage to Mo Zhuling, he could naturally break off the engagement as well. With his family background and power, did he really need to explain anything to Mo Zhuling and the others? What a joke. Moreover, given Mo Zhuling's behavior of seducing him even though she already had a fiancé, it was already an honor to call her a B*TCH. He could play with this kind of person if he wanted to. If he didn't want to play with her or if she was no longer useful, he could just throw her away. What was the big deal? Therefore, he didn't care at all. The members of the Lu family at the 7-star field also thought the same. "Yes, young master, you're the one who understands. Your subordinates are not as good as you." The middle-aged man flattered Lu Yu and said, "Then I'll send her a message immediately and tell her that young master will definitely be there." "Yes." Lu Yu responded in a low voice. Then, he said, "Let her be happy for a while. It'll be easier to get information out of her. By the way, you've been investigating for so long. Have you found out where her abilities come from?" The quality of the pills Mo Zhuling took out were extremely high. Even Lu Yu and the others would drool at the sight of them. However, there seemed to be a mysterious power behind her, so they didn't dare to casually investigate her. Otherwise, with Mo Zhuling's status, they would have caught her long ago after she revealed such an ability in front of them. They would have skinned her and broken her bones to get to the bottom of her secrets and the source of her pills. It was because of that mysterious power that Lu Yu and the others didn't dare to act rashly. They pretended to be attracted to Mo Zhuling and couldn't extricate themselves. In reality, he was just feigning civility with her. "No," the middle-aged man said respectfully. Speaking of which, this matter was really strange. Mo Zhuling's abilities came from a strange place. Those high-grade pills also came from a strange place. After all, they had investigated and found out that Mo Zhuling wasn't an alchemist. Those pills didn't belong to her. However, they couldn't find any clues. "Yes, let's put this matter aside for now. Don't alarm the person behind her." Lu Yu coldly snorted and then asked, "Then what about the true Spill continent?" Chapter 2862. It's still the same. As the middle-aged man said this, he was a bit depressed. Not only were they unable to find the source of Mo Zhuling's matter, but there was also something strange about the true Spill continent. It was clearly a low-level continent, but the people of the Star Alliance were so secretive about it. All information about it had been erased from the market. They had investigated it in many ways, but besides knowing that it was a low-level continent that had suddenly risen up and was under the protection of the Star Alliance, they knew nothing else. The more it's like this, the more it proves that the information left behind by my family is correct. As Lu Yu said this, his eyes flashed with excitement and fanaticism. He thought back to what his family had said about the true Spill continent. It was highly likely that there were sector beasts in the true Spill continent, and he couldn't help but feel excited. Sector beast. In the legends, there was an existence even more fierce than a god beast. If one could obtain it, even if one was an extreme piece of trash, they could still become an invincible overlord. If a sector beast was raised, its might would be indescribable. Originally, he had been very suspicious about the information left behind by his family. After all, how could such an existence exist on a low-level continent? He had only come to the Star Wilderness with the intention of giving it a try, but he didn't expect to hear all sorts of things about the true Spill continent. He couldn't help but conclude that there was indeed such a thing. Otherwise, why would the Star Alliance place so much importance on the tiny true Spill continent? The more secretive they were, the more it meant that there was a secret on the true Spill continent. They completely regarded the Star Alliance's protection of the true Spill continent as the protection of a secret. Lu Yu and the others had accidentally connected the matter of the sector beast with the true Spill continent. However, he wasn't completely sure about the situation on the true Spill continent, so he wasn't in a hurry to act. He wanted to inquire more about the sector beast from Mo Zhuling. He wanted to see how much the Star Alliance knew about the existence of the sector beast. Had they obtained it? If they had obtained it, or were about to obtain it, then Lu Yu's eyes revealed a trace of cold killing intent. At this time, in the headquarters of the Star Alliance, Mo Zhuling received a reply from Lu Yu and smiled. She knew that young patriarch Lu Yu would not reject her. On the day of the marriage proposal banquet, she would be the center of attention. So what if the people of True Spill Continent had the support of that man? The other party wasn't here. Moreover, as long as she didn't harm anyone from the True Spill Continent, even if the other members of the Star Alliance wanted to cause trouble for her, it would be useless. However, young Master Lu Yu beside her was different. With him around, who would dare to lay a hand on her? And as long as she casually instigated a few words, young Master Lu Yu's people would attack the people of True Spill Continent. Who could blame it on her? Mo Zhuling had thought it through very clearly. Now that his trump card had been exposed, he could only go all out. They wanted to use Lu Yu's people to deal with the people of True Spill Continent. She didn't believe that even if Luo Qingtong could hide, would she not care about the people of True Spill Continent? Humph. As Mo Zhuling thought this, he suddenly smiled with great satisfaction. However, the moment he touched her face, her expression turned ferocious. It wasn't because of anything else, but because of the injuries she had received in the mirror array. Chapter 2863. Damn it, that little white cat, what exactly was it? Mo Zhuling investigated clearly after this, that was not the restriction of the mirror array at all. He didn't know how the little white cat had entered the mirror array and why it was targeting him. Mo Zhuling gritted his teeth in hatred. Luo Qingtong was beside Ji Feiyu at this time, continuing to torment the medicinal power in the medicinal pill for him. Every time she took away from Sueyu and the others, it was not the same medicinal pill. She only used the medicinal inscription technique to purify and remove it. The medicinal pills that were pinched by her claws still did not look good. But Ji Feiyu knew that it was for his own good, so naturally, he ate all of it. After Sueyu and the others knew that all of this was done by Luo Qingtong, they treated her even better. The most obvious manifestation was they made a lot of small dried fish for Luo Qingtong. The latter was about to cry from being fed by them. She was not a real cat. Are these guys done yet? Even if it was a real cat, it would be sick of eating too much small dried fish. These scary women. Luo Qingtong tearfully looked at the big white rice that she used to have for every meal was all replaced with small dried fish. She was simply cursing in her heart. But she could not say it out loud. She could only use her claws to knock over her bowl to protest. After a few times, Sueyu and the others finally knew that she did not like to eat small dried fish. Little White is really a different cat. Yes. It actually doesn't like to eat small dried fish and likes to eat white rice. So amazing. Right, no wonder it can cure our young master. At first, Luo Qingtong did not have any problems listening to them. She just minded her own business and ate her own food. But when she heard the end, she almost spat out a mouthful of rice. Damn, what did this have to do with her not eating small dried fish? Also, who is Little White? You are the Little White. You bunch of scary women are the real noobs. On the other hand, Ji Feiyu was watching their interaction with a smile. From time to time, he would give Luo Qingtong some of the food on his table and then take some for himself. All these years, because he was born weak, his body and appetite were not very good. Therefore, he usually ate very little. But in the past few days, because of the little white cat's company, his appetite had become a little better. Especially now that his body's problems had been resolved, his appetite was improving day by day, and his body was becoming healthier day by day. This was all thanks to the little white cat. Therefore, he also fell in love with feeding the little white cat. Especially when Luo Qingtong was surrounded by dried fish, she would look at him as if he was the savior of the world, which made him laugh out loud. His mood became more and more cheerful day by day. And Luo Qingtong was saved by him, so she ate even more desperately. She was afraid that Sueyu's group of terrifying women would think of some way to torment her again. This group of fanatical women with the body of a tomboy and the heart of a young girl was really too scary. And Ji Feiyu's strength was steadily increasing, and he soon broke through to the martial emperor realm. Almost in a few days, he caught up with others for a few years, or even more than 10 years. The day of the marriage proposal banquet arrived. The entire Star Alliance was full of gongs and drums, and firecrackers were set off all over the place. On the streets and alleys, everyone was discussing the upcoming marriage proposal banquet, which diluted what had happened in the mirror array. In fact, the leader of the Star Alliance also took action to suppress this matter. At this moment, no one in Star City dared to mention that matter anymore. Chapter 2864. Luo Qingtong squatted beside Ji Feiyu. She looked at the man's white hair and red clothes. His stunning appearance made her feel that Mo Zhuling was a pile of cow dung. Fortunately, Mo Zhuling was a pile of cow dung. Otherwise, she would have wasted such a handsome man. While Luo Qingtong was thinking about this, everyone had already taken their seats at the banquet. Su Xiaoxiao and the others had also been invited by the Star Alliance. It was said that the leader of the Star Alliance had requested them to give them an explanation at the banquet. No one knew what Mo Zhuling and the leader of the Star Alliance were up to. However, they naturally had to get back the justice that they deserved. Previously, the leader of the Star Alliance had angrily left in front of the mirror array, saying that he would make Mo Zhuling give them an explanation. However, he had never returned. Not only had Su Xiaoxiao and the others not received an explanation, but Elder Fong and the others had also not received one. This time, the leader of the Star Alliance had wantonly held a marriage proposal banquet. Elder Fong and the others had originally planned to stop it. However, for some unknown reason, the leader of the Star Alliance had solemnly declared that he would settle everything at the marriage proposal banquet. At that time, he would naturally give them an explanation. If they still insisted on punishing Mo Zhuling at that time, he would definitely not stop them. As soon as he said that, everyone knew that his trump card should be at the marriage proposal banquet. However, although the family Ji was a top family in the 8-star region, everyone knew that the leader of the Star Alliance had insisted on this marriage proposal. It was still uncertain whether the leader of the Star Alliance would support them or not. After all, it was said that the disciple sent to marry Mo Zhuling was the legitimate son of the family Ji, but in reality, he was useless and abandoned. Under such circumstances, did he still expect to use the power and status of the family Ji to shut them up? If Elder Fong and the others cared, they wouldn't have forced him to abdicate. However, no matter what they said, the leader of the Star Alliance remained calm. He had been operating in the Star Alliance for many years. Even though Mo Zhuling's actions in the mirror array had hurt his reputation, there were still many forces supporting him. After all, they were all in the same boat. Those who relied on the leader of the Star Alliance could be dissatisfied with him. However, it was impossible for her to watch him suffer. Moreover, this time, the leader of the Star Alliance had made a solemn vow. Naturally, everyone wanted to believe him one more time and support him. As a result, the voices of Elder Fong and the others were suppressed. At this moment, Su Xiaoxiao and the others were sitting at the banquet and watching the show. Yuan Hu snorted coldly as he ate the fruit in his hand. I wonder what Mo Zhuling is up to. Don't tell me she wants that so-called family G to help her deal with us. Yuan Hu thought about it over and over again. He didn't know how Mo Zhuling was going to deal with them. Anyway, that woman definitely didn't have good intentions. He just didn't know whether the family G would help her or not. TSK, speaking of which, that family G is really unlucky to marry such a vicious and restless woman. I don't know how miserably he will be tormented in the future. Sooner or later, his family will be ruined by her. Yuan Hu mumbled as he held the fruit in his hand. I heard that the son of the family Ji is a rare handsome man. This is really a case of a fresh flower being stuck in cow dung. Before Yuan Hu could finish his sentence, he felt a lump in his throat and nearly choked himself to death. Chapter 2865. Little White Cat. It's that little white cat. His voice rang out. Su Xiaoxiao and the others all looked outside and saw Luo Qingtong hopping towards them from outside the square. After entering the square, Luo Qingtong saw them and immediately rushed towards them. Because today's occasion was special, Luo Qingtong didn't want to appear in front of Mo Zhuling, lest he used her as an excuse to deal with Ji Feiyu and the others. If that happened, Luo Qingtong would inexplicably become a scapegoat. How unhappy would that be? Therefore, after Ji Feiyu and the others arrived at the square, she jumped down from the carriage and rushed straight to the banquet. When she saw Su Xiaoxiao and the others, she immediately ran over. Originally, she was planning to find them after leaving the mirror array. However, because of Ji Feiyu's matter, she was delayed. Now, she could take the opportunity to see how they were doing. Su Xiaoxiao and the others were also very surprised to see Luo Qingtong. This little white cat was actually not the restriction in the mirror array. Everyone, like Mo Zhuling, thought that Luo Qingtong was the restriction in the mirror array. After it was triggered, it went to deal with Mo Zhuling. They were very grateful to the little white cat. They didn't expect that it wasn't the restriction in the mirror array. Not only that, but it also appeared in front of them alive. Everyone was surprised. Yuan Hu forcibly swallowed the piece of fruit stuck in his throat. Then, he hurriedly waved at Luo Qingtong and said, "Little white cat, come here quickly." He finally knew to lower his voice. Fortunately, during the banquet, the attendants and people from various families and forces were walking around and taking their seats. It was very noisy, so no one heard the shout just now. Luo Qingtong glanced at this silly guy and jumped onto the stool near them. She wagged her tail and looked at them. "Little white cat, is it really you?" "You are, the little white cat in the mirror array." After she jumped up, Yuan Hu and the others immediately scattered and surrounded Luo Qingtong. The group of people surrounded her so that she would not be seen by others. After all, this little white cat had ruined Mo Zhuling's plan to deal with them. If that woman saw it, wouldn't she fly into a rage? At that time, this little white cat might be in danger. After all, they were outside the mirror array and in the territory of the Star Alliance. Who knew if this little white cat could deal with Mo Zhuling and the others? Therefore, Yuanhu and the others all surrounded Luo Qingtong, leaving no gap. In the eyes of others, they had suddenly changed places and were sitting close to each other. No one knew what they were talking about. This kind of behavior would definitely be unacceptable if it was done by others. After all, at such a banquet, there were rules about who could sit where. It was impossible to sit casually. But Su Xiaoxiao and the others were different. Everyone knew that the higher-ups of the Star Alliance valued them very much. Ordinary powerhouses from high-level continents might not even have a status as high as theirs. As long as they didn't sit in the same seats as the higher-ups of the Star Alliance, no one would care about them. Chapter 2866. After they surrounded her, Luo Qingtong meowed softly and nodded, indicating that she was the little white cat in the mirror array. Su Xiaoxiao and the others had already known that it was unusual. They were afraid that it was not an ordinary little white cat, so they were not surprised to see it nodding. They just smiled and said to it, "I didn't expect it to be you. Thank you so much for what you did in the mirror array." The little white cat that Luo Qingtong transformed into was different from other little white cats. One could see that she was different at a glance. Especially her eyes, they were unusually smart, sharp, and domineering. Su Xiaoxiao and the others could recognize her at a glance. Seeing her nod, they all laughed. Ling Yu directly called a waiter to bring a plate of dried fish and then brought it in front of Luo Qingtong. "Come, little guy, eat." "Thank you." Luo Qingtong looked at the plate of dried fish and her forehead was full of black lines. Why did these people express their gratitude in the same way as Sui Yu and the others? She really didn't like to eat dried fish. Meow. Luo Qingtong coldly snorted and pushed away the plate of dried fish. Then, she looked up at Su Xiaoxiao and the others. The latter and the others had grown faster than she had imagined. After she left the True Spill continent, their strength had increased to the point where they were about to break through to the Venerable Realm. It had to be known that even in the 7 or 8-star domains, it was very common to see people at their age reach this level. Even in a 6-star region, only the direct descendants of mid-tier clans could reach this level. However, Su Xiaoxiao and the others had reached this step by relying on their fearless spirit and tenacity. During this time, when Luo Qingtong was by Ji Feiyu's side, she would often sneak out to inquire about Su Xiaoxiao and the others. She knew a lot about them and knew that their strength was hard to come by. They were all very good. Luo Qingtong felt a burst of warmth in her heart when she thought that they were all so desperate and fearless because of her. She tilted her head and looked at Su Xiaoxiao and the others. Su Xiaoxiao and the others also felt very strange. They didn't know why, but when they looked at the little white cat, they felt that she was very cute and very happy. However, when they saw it sizing them up, they did not know why, but a sense of pride involuntarily rose in their hearts. It was as if what was looking at them was not a cat, but their boss. It was really strange. Everyone looked at Luo Qingtong strangely. Ling Yu, who had wanted to touch Luo Qingtong, lowered her hand awkwardly when she saw Luo Qingtong's gaze. It was strange. It was just the gaze of a little white cat. They felt as if they were facing their boss, which made them feel both proud and strange at the same time. Just as everyone was feeling strange in their hearts, a voice from outside immediately attracted their attention. Suddenly, a voice came from the outside. "Young Master Ji of the 8-star Dongting region's family Ji has arrived." Everyone knew that the Dongting family Ji was the family Ji who had a marriage alliance with Mo Zhuling. And this young Master Ji should be Mo Zhuling's fiancé, the main character of this marriage proposal banquet. Therefore, when they heard this voice, everyone turned to look outside the banquet hall. Chapter 2867. At this moment, Ji Feiyu, Suiyu, and the others stepped into the plaza where the banquet was held. This was where the main plaza's platform was located. It was where the Star Alliance's people announced important events and held grand events. The main plaza's platform was about 1,000 feet tall. It stood in the center of the plaza and was surrounded by white jade railings. The ground was also paved with magic cloud stones that could not be bought with money. When people walked on the magic cloud stones, regardless of whether they knew how to cultivate or whether they had strength, they would feel like they had stepped through the clouds. It was very popular among the forces in the Star region. If you were not a powerful force, you would not be able to afford the magic cloud stones to pave the entire platform. At this moment, Ji Feiyu, who was dressed in red and had white hair that was slightly tilted to one side of his shoulders, walked over. It was as if everyone present was a fake immortal disguised as a mortal. He was the only one who had stepped through the clouds. His clothes fluttered in the wind as if he was a real immortal. His eyes were especially clear and clean. His temperament was generous and gentle. When he walked slowly, it was as if there was light around him. Even Qin Xiong, Suiyu, and the others who were walking behind him could not hide his elegance even if their auras were monstrous and they exuded a powerful strength that no one else could reach. Damn! This is Mo Zhuling's fiancé, the son of that family Ji. Yuan, who looked at Ji Feiyu, who was walking slowly like a cloud and wind, with a shocked expression. He could not believe his eyes. Oh my God! What a waste! What a waste! Such a godlike person is actually the fiancé of that vicious woman, Mo Zhuling. This is more than a flower stuck in cow dung. Compared to him, Mo Zhuling is not even a piece of cow dung, okay? God is really unfair these days. That vicious woman, Mo Zhuling, actually has such a godlike fiancé. And this fiancé is from an 8-star Star region family. That woman, Mo Zhuling, is too lucky. Yuan, who beat his chest to express his dissatisfaction. Damn, how could that woman be worthy of such a godlike person? Furthermore, this young Master Ji looked very gentle and easy to talk to. If he married Mo Zhuling in the future, who knew how he would be tormented by that vicious woman? That was too tragic. It was simply a tragedy. Yuan, who thought, he did not even have the mood to eat. Damn, no wonder Mo Zhuling had said that he would give them an explanation at this banquet. It turned out that he had already seen through this young Master Ji's character. The other party looked so gentle and kind. How could he be a match for that vicious woman? He would probably be used as a gun's gun. At that time, she could use the Ji family to cause trouble for them. He fears as use a B, Yuan who's a A's. Su Xiaoxiao and the others frowned as they watched Ji Feiyu slowly walk over. If the family Ji really helped Mo Zhuling, Elder Fong and the others might not be able to stop them. That woman, Mo Zhuling, was really too hateful. It seemed that she was determined to use the family Ji. Luo Qingtong, on the other hand, was carefully observing Mo Zhuling. She looked at Ji Feiyu with a trace of amazement in her eyes. However, that trace of amazement quickly disappeared from her eyes. Chapter 2868. He was just a good-for-nothing. What was there to pretend to be? To Mo Zhuling, no matter how good-looking Ji Feiyu was, he would still be frustrated if he wasn't strong enough. If she, Mo Zhuling, was going to marry someone strong. Not only was he strong, but he also had to have a high status. As for Ji Feiyu, he only had a face and no strength. She wouldn't even want him to be her dog, let alone marry him. With that thought in mind, she immediately shifted her gaze away with a look of disdain. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes when she saw this. It seemed that Mo Zhuling had other plans for this proposal banquet. He wasn't really going to marry Ji Feiyu. Since that was the case, she was relieved. Otherwise, it would be like what Yuan Hu had said, a fresh flower stuck in cow dung. Although Mo Zhuling was worse than cow dung in her eyes, there was no better way to describe it. She would just have to put up with it. It was a good thing that Mo Zhuling didn't like Ji Feiyu. When Ji Feiyu became strong enough, she wouldn't be able to cry. She was afraid that she wouldn't even be able to cry. She had inexplicably given up on such a monstrous genius with great potential. As Luo Qingtong thought of this, she sat down leisurely on the stool where Yuan Hu and the others were sitting. She slowly ate the fruits they had prepared for her. Everyone was conflicted for a while, but they didn't think too much about it. In short, they had to deal with whatever came their way. If they couldn't control the development of the situation, it was useless to worry. It was better to conserve energy and wait for Mo Zhuling to make a move. That way, they would be able to deal with him. As everyone thought of this, they stopped paying attention to Ji Feiyu. The latter and the others were led to their seats by the people from the Star Alliance. They were arranged to sit in the front row, near the chairman. Mo Zhuling was sitting opposite them. Sui Yu and the others frowned when they saw that Mo Zhuling didn't even look at them. Sister Sui Yu, don't you think the attitude of the Star Alliance's eldest daughter is a bit strange? The group of maidservants looked at Sui Yu and whispered. The latter frowned and said, maybe the Star Alliance's miss is in a bad mood. Sui Yu's voice was very uncertain. Along the way, they vaguely heard some things about the young lady of the Star Alliance, but it wasn't very clear. Sui Yu also didn't dare to casually tell Ji Feiyu. Their future young master's wife was probably not an easy person to get along with. If what they heard was true, then Mo Zhuling's mind was extremely vicious. Not only that, he was also extremely sinister. Otherwise, he wouldn't have harmed people in the mirror array. However, Sui Yu and the others did not know whether this matter was true or false, so it was not easy to judge. They could only hope that what they had heard was false. While everyone was worried, Ji Feiyu absent-mindedly thought about Luo Qingtong, who suddenly left. As soon as the white cat left the carriage, it ran away without a trace. Ji Feiyu somewhat regretted bringing it to this banquet. Otherwise, it wouldn't have left, right? However, just as Ji Feiyu thought of this, he smiled bitterly. He had forgotten that they were the ones who had picked up the little fellow along the way. Even if he didn't bring it to this banquet, it would still leave when its master came looking for it, or if it discovered its master's traces. As Ji Feiyu thought of this, he suddenly felt a sense of loss. At this time, in the banquet, everyone arrived one after another. The banquet was full of people. Chapter 2869. Thank you, everyone, for coming to my daughter's marriage proposal banquet. This banquet is specially held for my daughter. I want everyone to share my joy. As he spoke, he glanced in the direction of Ji Feiyu and the others. The latter and the others immediately became the focus of the entire scene. Even though they knew that Ji Feiyu couldn't cultivate, the crowd still envied Mo Zhuling for being able to marry such a person. Firstly, Ji Feiyu's face was as clear as the wind and clear as the moon. He was a handsome man that was hard to come by. Secondly, Ji Feiyu was backed by the Dongting family Ji. Regardless of whether he could cultivate or not, his status as a member of the family Ji represented everything. Furthermore, he was the son of the first wife and was highly valued by his parents. Although he didn't have a high status in the family Ji, he was at least someone who couldn't be ignored or humiliated. Such a status was completely unattainable for the families of the 9-star region. To put it bluntly, if he could cultivate, Mo Zhuling wouldn't have gotten the chance to get engaged to him. Under everyone's gaze, Ji Feiyu stood up and bowed to the leader of the Star Alliance. Then, he solemnly proposed, Family Ji Feiyu is proposing marriage to the leader of the Star Alliance. I sincerely hope that the leader of the Star Alliance will marry his beloved daughter, Mo Zhuling, to me. In the future, my glory will be her glory, and her humiliation will be my humiliation. We will never leave each other, and we will live together. This was the biggest promise that Ji Feiyu could make to the leader of the Star Alliance. He didn't know if he would like Mo Zhuling in the future. Perhaps he wouldn't like her in this lifetime. But even so, as long as she was his wife, Ji Feiyu would protect her well. He would keep her away from pain and humiliation. He couldn't tell her that he could cultivate yet. But even if his strength increased in the future, he wouldn't treat her any differently. He would give her happiness and good health. He would let her enjoy the same glory as him. He would let her stand proudly by his side. No matter what kind of strength or identity he had in the future, he would never leave her. However, Ji Feiyu's serious proposal was met with a cold sneer. She. Mo Zhuling sat across from him and sneered at him. I've been thinking about how thick-skinned you must be to make you say something like that. As she said this, she looked at Ji Feiyu's stunned face with malice. Your glory is my glory. I really can't believe that you can actually say something like that. What glory can a trash like you have? The honor of letting me be ridiculed and humiliated in the family Ji. Ji Feiyu was stunned when he heard Mo Zhuling's words. He looked at the malicious and arrogant face across from him and clenched his sleeves. I won't let you suffer this, he said with difficulty. He was indeed a good-for-nothing, but he was now able to cultivate. But he couldn't tell her yet. Even if he couldn't cultivate, he wouldn't let her suffer such humiliation. Just like how he dealt with Qin Xiong. As long as he wanted to, he had countless ways to protect her. Not to mention, he had even considered breaking off the engagement in order not to implicate her. How could he let her suffer such humiliation? However, Mo Zhuling couldn't be bothered to listen to him. Chapter 2870. Mo Zhuling sneered at him and said coldly, Do you know how laughable you are in my eyes? You're just like a maggot. She wantonly humiliated Ji Feiyu. Mo Zhuling had been waiting for this moment for a long time. She wanted to return all the ridicule, contempt, and condescension that the Ji family had placed on her back to them. And Ji Feiyu, who couldn't cultivate, was her biggest breakthrough. Who told him to be a member of the family Ji's people and to be so arrogant as to ask for her hand in marriage? What a joke. Even if she, Mo Zhuling, wanted to marry someone, she definitely wouldn't marry a good-for-nothing like him, a good-for-nothing who only had a pretty face, alright? When Mo Zhuling's voice sounded, Sueyu and the others finally regained their senses. They looked at Mo Zhuling, who had spoken viciously and whose words were like knives cutting at their young master. They couldn't help but shout angrily, Bitch, what did you say? What right do you have to slander our young master like this? Everyone was shocked and furious. They looked at Ji Feiyu, whose face was pale and body on the verge of collapse, and felt an indescribable pain in their hearts. No one knew how good their young master was. In this world, everyone could accuse their young master of being shameless and overestimating himself, but Mo Zhuling couldn't. Because their young master had even planned to break off the engagement, which was disadvantageous to him, for her sake. If he hadn't suddenly been able to cultivate, he probably would have broken off the engagement and set Mo Zhuling free. And if it had been any other young master from an aristocratic family, who would be willing to do such a thing? Not to mention that after their young master could cultivate, he didn't despise her at all. What right did she have to despise their young master? And to humiliate and embarrass him in front of everyone? When everyone arrived, they finally believed that what Zhuozhua had heard about Mo Zhuling was true. This woman was indeed sinister and vicious, just like a snake or a scorpion. Sueyu and the others' eyes were bloodshot as they looked at Mo Zhuling angrily. Qin Xiong and the others' eyes were also abnormally angry. Bang! They raised their hands and overturned the banquet in front of them. They looked coldly at the Star Alliance's leader and the others and said, "You people from the Star Alliance better give us an explanation. Otherwise, we'll wash this place with blood today." Qin Xiong's eyes were malicious. He came here to be in the limelight, not to be played like a monkey. He also didn't come here to be humiliated. If the Star Alliance's people, he would immediately wash this place with blood. When Qin Xiong and the others spoke, everyone in the Star Alliance, who had been stunned by the development of the matter, also regained their senses. They looked at the leisurely Mo Zhuling and the Alliance Master of the Star Alliance and said angrily, "Alliance Master, are you going to let Mo Zhuling do whatever she wants? Are you trying to get us all killed?" Elder Fong and the others were furious. They originally thought that Mo Zhuling and the others wanted the family Ji's people to deal with them. But now, Mo Zhuling had offended the family Ji's people. Mo Zhuling had turned a proper proposal banquet into a feud banquet. Did the father and daughter think that it was impossible for the family Ji's people to help them, so they decided to provoke the family Ji's people so that they could perish together with them? Were they crazy? Mo Zhuling sneered as Elder Fong and the others questioned him harshly. "So what if I'm acting recklessly? Ji Feiyu is a good-for-nothing. You don't even let me talk about it. Moreover..." Chapter 2871. 7. 7-Star Field's Lu family from Jinchang region has arrived. The voice was a little distorted by the end of the sentence. The person who passed the message was simply too shocked. The Lu family from the 7-Star Field. They were from the 7-Star Field. Oh my God. It was already an honor for these Star Alliance members to be able to meet someone from the 8-Star Field in their lifetime. The people from the 7-Star region, they had never thought about it before. As for the people from the higher star fields, they had probably only seen them in their dreams. Now, a group of people from the 7-Star Field had appeared in front of them. How could they not be shocked? When the messenger's voice sounded, Mo Zhuling raised his head and puffed out his chest even more proudly and proudly. The Lu family was naturally here to propose marriage to her. Did these people from the family Ji think they were so great just because they were from the 8-Star Field? She had the young master of the Lu family from the 7-Star Field as her backer. What did the people from the family Ji amount to? Mo Zhuling was overjoyed as he went forward to welcome them. Everyone at the banquet was dumbfounded. What was going on? Why were the people from the 7-Star Field here? And judging from Mo Zhuling's appearance, it seemed like he was here for her. While Elder Fong and the others were shocked and uneasy, Qin Xiong and the others stood rooted to the ground. The Lu family from the 7-Star Field. Their expressions changed unpredictably. They could not quite believe what they had heard. At this moment, the people from the Lu family from the 7-Star Field strode into the banquet. "On the orders of our young master, we are here to propose marriage to Mo Zhuling and Miss Mo on his behalf. These are the betrothal gifts from our young master." The middle-aged man who was striding over waved his hand. Powerful guards walked out from behind him and placed the betrothal gifts they had brought in the center of the banquet. Everyone was shocked and amazed as they looked at the dazzling jewels. Every single one of them was a rare and precious betrothal gift. The way they looked at Mo Zhuling could no longer be described as envy and jealousy. No wonder Mo Zhuling had been so dismissive of the family Ji. It was because the Lu family was backing them up. As for the young master of the 7-Star Field clan, no matter how one looked at it, he was much more powerful than the disciples of the 8-Star Field. Not to mention that the person in the 8-Star family Ji was a loser. With that thought in mind, everyone looked at Ji Feiyu and the others with pity. She knew that she would definitely be humiliated by the family Ji. The Lu family was much more powerful than them. Furthermore, the person who had proposed marriage to Mo Zhuling was their young master. Even if Ji Feiyu wasn't a loser, he wouldn't be a match for the family Ji Feiyu, let alone a loser like him. While everyone was thinking this, Qin Xiong and the others' expressions stiffened. The moment the Liu family arrived, their talk of massacring the Star Alliance became a joke. Their expressions changed drastically, turning green and white. Then, all of a sudden, they turned around and ran. He looked like he was fleeing for his life. As for Ji Feiyu, he was left behind. He stood in front of his own banquet, only feeling desolation in his heart. He looked at Mo Zhuling, who was looking at him with disdain. He didn't know how things had turned out this way. The other party had asked him to propose marriage today just to embarrass him, right? However, she had only needed to tell him that she liked someone else and he would have agreed. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.